Welcome, everybody, once again to John Webster Film for another episode of Cinematic Realms. I'm your host, John Webster, and with me today, I have Lauren, Shakespeare of Thrones, Kelly, jdedredhed, and my wonderful, I can't talk today, wonderful friend, Laura, who hopefully a bunch of you saw over on Here Be Dragons when we did our talk about aliens. But today we're talking about the film Master and Commander, The Far Side of the World. As some of you might be able to tell from Shakes's attire, which is fantastic. I love it.
Also have a model of the H.M.S. Surprise behind me, so surprise is on our side.
So I really want to thank you guys for all coming on. I never dreamed that within this fandom I'd get together a panel for people to talk about this film, because I feel like I know of people who love it, but it does feel underappreciated. So I figure we'll just go through and talk about how we each first saw the film and what our thoughts of it were. Shakes, since you kind of outdone all of us.
I really don't mean to upstage anybody. I just had a lot of shit from, my mom has a lot of shit from this era or of this era, so I wanted to take advantage of it and entertain everybody, since it's a global pandemic and we're doing our best to keep each other entertained. But sure, I'll talk about my first viewing of Master and Commander. I believe it was the day that it came out. It was sometime in early November in 2003, and I remember I was in ROTC in college. I was in my freshman year, and we were on a trip to McCord Air Force Base, just a few cadets on a trip to the local Air Force Base to kind of see how officers work in the real world. And for our evening out, we decided to see this new movie, Master and Commander. And, of course, we chose a military movie because we were going into the military. And I don't know, I wasn't expecting a whole lot. I didn't even know what it was going to be about, but I was blown away. And it just, everything about it, the storyline, the characters, the themes, and the soundtrack. Oh my God, the cinematography just blew me out of the water, no pun intended.
Yeah, we are going to talk about that when we start going through the film, the soundtrack, especially because I feel like, especially in that first scene, they really kind of knock your socks off with how immersive the sound design is. And the film did win for Best Sound Editing, which, of course, it was a running joke that year at the Oscars that they probably won because Lord of the Rings wasn't nominated in that category. But they absolutely deserved it. So we'll just go sort of down and around. So Laura, how did you first see the film?
This was actually not something that I saw when it was released, and it took me a while to actually come across it. It was a few years ago, and I was just looking for a new film to explore. A lot of times when I want to discover new movies, I'll look back at movies that have won Academy Awards in the past or have been nominated for a bunch of things, and this one was standing out. So I decided to give it a shot. I instantly fell in love with it. I thought everything was great about it. I thought it was a really good character study, as opposed to just a movie that is naval fighting scenes back and forth, which they could have gone that route, but they didn't, and I'm thankful for. And it was just really nice to see that, but also have an exploration of character development, ethics, morality, and it was a really great story to tell as well. And that's what really has always kept me just loving it ever since I first saw it.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, Kelly, what were your thoughts?
So I pretty much, as a historian, just I've liked the movie, but it wasn't until I became a historical interpreter on board ships that I really fully appreciated the historical accuracy and the storytelling. Not to mention the music, the writing, the cinematography, but just as a fan of history and a history student, seeing Hollywood do some justice to the, as far as like educating the masses, especially when it comes to maritime history.
Yeah, before I get to my own thoughts on the film, I want to backtrack for a second because it seems like my excitement to get into discussion of the movie made me get ahead of myself. I actually want to go through and just for each of you to introduce yourselves, because I've realized just because I know you all really well doesn't mean that everybody watching probably does. So yeah, if you guys just want to go through and tell everybody a bit about who you are and what you do. We'll go in reverse this time.
So
we'll start with, either way. Go ahead.
Go ahead. That. Go ahead.
Okay, Kelly, go ahead.
All right.
My name is Kelly, and a lot of you all know me as jdedredhed on a lot of the chats, and on Twitter, you can find me at Bonnie Lass Lowry. I am a historical interpreter at a living history museum. I work aboard replicas of early 16th century tall ships. I've sailed all of them amongst other ships as well, and I've worked maintenance on them as well. So I study maritime architecture, design, technology, engineering, and as far as like just everything nautical history, and design.
So cool.
Laura?
I'm Laura. I am a friend of John's from Game of Thrones podcast. That's how we originally met and got to know each other, and have spent loads of time just hanging out at said Game of Thrones conventions and getting to know each other better. He introduced me to a bunch of the people that you see on the screen right now and in the chat, whom I've gotten to know very well over the past couple of weeks. What can I say? I love movies. So, and I love this movie. So when it came up that he was going to be doing a discussion about this, I admittedly self-invited myself onto this panel. And thankfully, John was very hospitable about that. So here we go.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, Shakes?
Hi, and I'm Shakes, also known as Shakes of Thrones, or Lauren. That's my given name, my birth name, I suppose. And I pretty much got into this whole, like everybody else here. I know John from Twitter and the Game of Thrones fandom, Song of Ice and Fire fandom. So we met talking about it that way. And we also did a podcast on Kenneth Branagh's Hamlet a few months ago, because I'm also really into Shakespeare. That's hence the name, the Shakes of Thrones handle. And we really enjoyed doing that. And at the end, I remember John asked me what my other favorite movies were, and I named Master and Commander as one of them. And he was like, we totally got to do a stream about it. And I'm so excited it's turned into a panel, because the more people we have to gush about this movie, the better.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's funny to think, because the Hamlet one was one of the first streams that I did. So I'm sure I'm still quite rough around the edges if you go back and watch that stream. But still, we had a fantastic discussion, and another one of my favorite films. But okay, so now we can probably dive into Master and Commander. I'm really, beyond just being fond of this movie because it's a great movie, I'm also really nostalgic for it because it came out in 2003, and of course, I think everybody knows I'm an enormous Lord of the Rings fan, so those period of years is just has a haze over it where I remember everything from that time very fondly. And this movie has the distinction of being probably the one film that if it had beat Return of the King for Best Picture, I would have been like, that's fair. And so
I mean, honestly, that's why I kind of lament that it came out the same year that Return of the King did, because Peter Weir was just so upset that it didn't do better than it did. At least this is what I remember hearing, that's why there wasn't a sequel. And when you watch the movie, you can so see how it would be set up for a sequel and never return to it.
I actually remember when I mean, it's funny that we would talk about the ending right off the bat, but when the movie ended, I was like, oh, this is how people who hadn't read The Lord of the Rings felt after each film, where it just leaves you hanging and you're like, no, what comes next? And there never was a next. But that's okay, because I actually think that, I mean, it's not okay. I want a sequel still, but I think that the ending of the film is incredibly beautiful. But we're going to get to that. I will just say that this film stuck out to me because I feel like every once in a while you get two movies that on the surface level kind of seem like they trade in similar stock, but underneath they're very different. It feels like we had this emergence of like seafaring, quote unquote, epics that year with Pirates of the Caribbean, which is entirely different, and this, and I feel like Pirates of the Caribbean was the one that made a big splash and drove audiences in, and this, and this is such a beautiful sort of meditation on, you know, humanity and, you know, the friendship, and you've got that sort of duality of, you know, war and conflict versus the natural world. And so I feel like this film had a lot of things to say, and it's kind of a shame that it didn't get more attention, even though it was nominated for a lot of Oscars, but it just, you know, it didn't do well enough at the box office to warrant a sequel. And I feel like I do always hear people say this is a, you know, underrated movie, but I just wish there were more of us. But yeah, okay. So I said my piece on that. Sort of where to start, I guess. I will say that as far as the actual start of this film, I like that it's quiet to start, and it kind of builds up to this, you know, to showing off its big sound design and production work, but it starts off very delicate, kind of easing you into life aboard the ship before it really gets going.
Yeah, and I love it because there are like always those quiet moments in sailing. Like what is the saying? 90% of sailing is just kind of waiting for something to happen, and 10% of it is, oh shit, we're going to die. It might even be more something like 95% versus 5%, but you get that sense of like just the silence and the quietude at the beginning, and I also enjoy that.
Yeah, and we get introduced early on to the character of Mr. Hollam, who I just feel so bad for throughout this film.
John,
Yeah.
slow down. All right,
okay.
We got to talk about the opening scene before any words are spoken.
Okay.
So you're walking along with the crewmen as they're doing a boat check or a ship's check. So you get to see the more intimate parts of the ship, the smaller nooks and crannies. When you have the crewmen walking through the gun deck, and you can see the guns are actually named, you know, Jumping Jack and Sudden Death. The sandglass being turned, first of all, someone tapped it, which is a no-no. That is not something you're allowed to do. So the 30-minute glass runs out, and then the bells are struck. A 4-hour watch or a sailor's work shift is measured in half-hour increments. So with each half hour that goes by is how many times the bell is struck. So you hear the bell rung in 4 pairs. Ding, 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 ding. And they're so, like, they even had the Marine ring the bell, which is on point. That was like, just, oh my gosh, like, oh, chef's kiss. It was
And
so
how do we know
great.
that? And we know the difference between the Marines and the rest of them because the Marines have the red coats.
Yes. So the Marine is the one that rings the bell in on a like ship of the line. So you see the crew members, off watch crew, coming down from the rig, and the on watch going up into the rig, and it was just perfection.
It's beautiful.
And, yeah. And then you have the opening scene with about like, I think it was just before 6 bells. And that is something that you see later on, the captain recording in the ship's log. 6 bells, engagement. 6 bells is, in this case, 7 a.m. Okay, sorry. Go on.
No, I love it. That's great. But
I
it
feel
makes
like I'm watching the movie. It's wonderful.
It does make me sad, though, that the movie essentially starts off with something that says, no, they wouldn't have been allowed to do that.
Can you explain exactly what they wouldn't, what was wrong there again? I don't think I completely caught it. I know, I'm serious. So they have like the hourglass that they're turning over.
It's a half hour. It's a 30-minute glass.
Okay.
So it's so it measures 30 minutes. Tapping on the glass could rush the sand. That's like if you're
tapping.
about to...
I thought you said tacking, and I was like,
no.
Okay.
So it's like speeding along the time clock. You know, if you're trying to clock out and like you move, that's like you moving the hands of the clock. You're not allowed to do that.
So maybe that was like an internal character thing, though. Like, okay, come on. I want
well,
to go to bed.
that's like, I think it's one of those cheeky little things that someone who appreciates someone on my pathetic level of obsession really is like, we have the level of, you can watch, someone like me can watch something ridiculous like Pirates of the Caribbean and just appreciate the ridiculousness of it. But when it comes to something like this, it's just,
yeah. Well, I understand, because then like if it's just a few seconds off, then that's going to set everything else off. Like,
yes.
all the ships. Okay. We're going to be here for like 12 hours, you guys.
Yeah, sorry. All right. Okay, so Hollam, go.
Yeah. So first of all, before I go on to talking about characters, Laura, did you have any thoughts on the opening?
I think Kelly pretty much covered it. If I had to continue on, I would bring up Hollam as well, and one of the scenes that happened next, which is you have the changing of the people on the watch, and you see Hollam, who is the lead on that watch, supposedly seeing a dark shadow in the fog as he is watching, and he reports it to Calumet, who is one of his fellow midshipmen, and Calumet urges him, you need to make a decision. Would you like to beat to quarters with this, or what is your plan of action here? And it is very problematic that Hollam is so unsure of himself right off the bat, and that he's unable to make that decision for himself. And we see Calumet urging him, you're officer of the watch, you need to make this call. And he just looks so shell-shocked that Calumet ends up making the decision to beat to quarters for him. And I definitely want to spend a lot of time talking about Hollam throughout the course of this movie, because, I mean, spoiler alert, things don't always go well for this man. And it's very heartbreaking, but it's very standoutish that we see the problems that he has with leadership right from the get-go.
I think it's a movie that's better for the existence of Mr. Hollam to kind of counter like the incredible leadership that we see from Jack Aubrey, and also, I mean, his arrogance as well. you know.
Yeah.
But then Hollam is sort of the other side of that coin. And I remember watching it in the theater as, you know, a young 18-year-old ROTC cadet with my friends by me, and we were all just kind of cringing, like, we don't want to be Mr. Hollam as officers. Like that's the example that you would rather be the arrogant, like, type of officer who makes decisions too hastily rather than a Mr. Hollam. Because then you're just like an effective weak officer, and nobody wants to be that, which I don't know. I think that there, and I think that throughout the movie there's like very much a push and pull of the yin and the yang, the soft side of war, like soft tactics and like hard tactics of war, you know, and thoughts I'd like to return to later, but Hollam definitely has a part in that texture.
Yeah. I think one of the things I love most about this movie is I feel like every time I come back to it, I know these characters a little bit better. And it feels like I get to keep coming back to this crew and peel back the layers and see more of them. And it always breaks my heart watching Mr. Hollam, especially right off the beginning of this movie, because I'm always like, just be a little more sure of yourself. You can do this, man. But it always comes to that moment where he won't make that decision. But the truth is, I feel like, especially when I was younger watching this film, part of me felt like I might very well be Mr. Hollam because I don't think I'm the type of person who, would rise to authority that easily. And so there's always the tendency to want to leave the really big decisions to somebody else. But yeah, I think the actor whose name is, let me look it up right here, Lee Ingleby, he does a phenomenal job, and you can see right when he sees that ship in the fog, you can see it on his face. It's like, he knows what he saw, but he just, I think, lacks the courage to really stand up and say that he saw it. But we do get to the point then when Mr. Calamy takes it upon himself to issue the call to beat to quarters, and then we get this phenomenal sequence where, as someone who loves editing, this scene is incredible. Just the way it's all cut together. You got the drums, providing this tempo as everybody goes about getting in, to their assigned positions and doing what they're supposed to do. And I especially just love the way it's cut, where when you get to Stephen, wait, why am I forgetting how to pronounce his name?
Maturin.
Maturin.
And the way he's laying out his surgeon's tools, and then it cuts to the shot, like an upward shot of him getting ready, and everything seems cut in like such a beautiful sequence. And later on, I'm jumping a little bit ahead, but there's a moment later on where they're in battle, and it shows him like down there working on a patient. He's like, more sand on the floor. And then it cuts to up a board, and Jack's going, fire. And then the cannon goes off. It's just the picture editing and the sound editing during this whole opening sequence is masterful.
It's like a dance.
Yeah. Kelly, I could tell you wanted to jump in and talk about maybe when beat to quarters happens and what they were all doing. Was I right? Or
yeah, that's it's absolutely right. I think that scene is well cut, and when it finally does cut to Jack actually like putting, strapping on his sling for the sword when he's about to go up on deck. It's cut brilliantly.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Okay, sorry. I just was so prepared for these people were heading in the wrong direction or something. but none of that. Okay. Yeah, there's you mentioned when they show Jack, Russell Crowe's entrance where it shows him like getting ready, and there's the shot where like he, is stepping like on a piece of paper like it's a map or something, and he like twists his foot. It's just the way it's done to show that he's getting ready, and then he's putting on his uniform and stuff, and then all of a sudden the drums stop and it quiets down and he goes up on deck. I think that this is a brilliant movie moment because you're just waiting, and and once Mr. Hollam tells him what he thinks he saw, things sort of settle down for a minute, but you're like, no, something's going to happen. Something's going to happen.
Yeah.
Well, I think you have to know too, because when you're seeing what Hollam is seeing as he's looking into the fog, as a audience member watching the film, you do see that same dark shape. So you know that Hollam is correct with what he saw, and this moment of quiet is inevitably not going to last, but you don't know where it's going to go from here. And you just have that moment where Aubrey's like, what did you see? And Hollam is still just shell-shocked. And you have him telling him, okay, well, maybe it was nothing, but you still did the right thing. And then all of a sudden, bam, you get to that action.
Yeah, I also love the introduction of Captain Jack Aubrey. I mean, just how everything kind of quiets when you see him getting ready in his cabin, and then he comes out and somebody puts on his jacket. I believe it's Mr. Killick who does that, and then gives him like an update of the weather conditions. It's just like this very here comes the general moment from Hamilton, sort of a thing. Like this is the guy. And
I get that reference now.
You do? Good. Well, for anybody who doesn't, it's like my favorite song, Right Hand Man from Hamilton, so check it out. But you just get this sense like this is the guy in charge, and it's not just because he's got the captain's uniform and the hat and everything, but it's because he has all that experience. And when he says, yeah, you did the right thing, and he's about to walk away a few seconds later, but then you see something, you see him squint a little bit, and you just get the sense like his spidey senses are going off. Like, I feel like it's like something that he innately feels is out there. And then he looks through his spyglass, sees the explosions in the distance, and his command for everybody to get down probably saved a few lives.
Yeah, I mean, just again, it's what I was saying about that the movie opens up relatively quiet, and yeah, we have the beats of quarters sequence with the drums and everything, but this is where, from a like sound design perspective, the film really it takes off. It's when, and even that cannon blast in the distance is not very loud. You can it's like it's more of a rumble, and then it's him screaming down, all hands down, and then that's when the fireworks start. I remember when this film came out on DVD, I still had like a full decked out surround sound system in my parents' home. And every time I watched this movie, I just remember we had just gotten our dog around that time, and our poor little dog would always start like looking around all different places because you had the wood flying like all over the place. And
it's very loud. Like, yeah. You have to turn it up in the beginning to hear the dialogue, and then you're like, oh shit, turn it way down.
Yeah. Any standout, because this opening sequence really is sort of chaos. But I'm wondering what you guys think of various moments in this sequence, because I feel like it's what's great about it as an action sequence is that it's very loud, it's very hectic, but it knows when to sort of calm down from it. You've got that moment where Jack sort of slips and hits his neck, and the sound kind of quiets down for a minute while he comes and gets back up, and then it comes back in full force. So I feel like it's a movie that knows, this is the loud part, but let's not forget the human level. But I don't know. What do you guys think about this whole opening battle sequence?
I mean,
I always have a lot to say. Go ahead.
Zero issue with it. I thought it was incredibly well done. I think on top of the sound editing, the sound mixing was also spectacular, because you have so many different noises in terms of cannon fire and wind and men, screaming and shouting and scrambling about. I thought that was mixed together just exceptionally well. I like that the cutting happens frantically, but then you also get those slower moments in editing where you see, for example, Blakeney's arm getting hit with splinter shrapnel from the cannon blast, and it allows you to focus on what has happened to him and the injuries that he has just sustained. But it also, yep, there he is. But it also just shows you the franticness of being under attack when, yes, these men had beat to quarters, but they were also seemingly unprepared for this attack in a way as well, and they were just trying to now live through it.
That large splinter is called a shiver. So
this is one of the reasons why Kelly is here today. Shiver
me timbers. That's where it comes from. So large splinters. It usually comes from the inner part of the bulkhead buckling after being hit with shot, and the gun crew is usually showered with these very large, deadly splinters, which are referred to as shivers. Something that my first mate actually brought up in the chat was the breaking down of the bulkhead. So when you have the first introduction of Captain Aubrey, you have him walking from essentially you have like a salon or a parlor where the captain usually has his officers dine. That is closed off as they're dining from the gun deck. And you see that later on as they are actually, after they go through their gun drills, and Jack is like, all right, everybody, double rations of grog. And then the bulkheads are coming back up. You see someone pulling down a dinner table. Everything is just, every square inch of space has to be utilized. So you have actual partitions that are set up along the beams of the ships that provide privacy, and almost completely separate rooms that will vanish when you take down the bulkheads. So the gun deck will run fore and aft all the way unimpeded when the gun deck is being operated.
Cool.
Hey, how about you, Shakes? Any sort of thoughts on this sequence or moments that stand out to you?
Oh, for me?
Yeah.
I think that one of my favorite shots is of Maturin in his surgeon's room, and he's like, all these men, as there's still shots being fired, all these men are pouring into the doctor's room, and he's operating on them like while this is happening and bandaging them up, and you can see him slipping in the blood on the floor.
Yeah.
Like, you just get this shot of his feet, and he's slipping in the blood that's already on the floor, like while this is still happening. And I really enjoy that shot. I mean, not because I'm drawn to the gruesomeness of it or anything, but it just like gives you that side of the war as well.
Yeah, I like that. It seems like regardless of what your job on the ship is, like, everybody is immersed in the battle. You get that line from Stephen.
Everybody's got one.
Yeah, when he's like, when things quiet down, he's like, why we stop fire? Even he's not focused just on his patients. He has to be aware of, what's going on with the ship and everything. It does look like Shakes is frozen up. Is that just me, or?
Yeah, it looks like she's. Oh, here she comes. She's come back in.
Or we've lost her. I don't know. Well, hopefully we'll get her back. Now, I did want to go through the opening sequence because I think it's just such a masterfully put together. Hold on. All right. We have you back, Shakes. Can you hear us? Hello?
I think so. I think we're still talking about the opening sequence.
Yeah. We just lost you for a second.
Okay, cool. I know.
Yes, we're still talking about the opening sequence.
But yeah, it's funny. God, I just looked. We're 40 minutes in, and we're still on the beginning. But I want to.
It's cool to talk about it.
So, I see no problem.
But I did want to talk about it in some detail because I think it's an incredibly strong opening and notable because I think it's different from how a lot of blockbusters kind of, and it's not a blockbuster, but it's an action movie. So I think you might go in with certain expectations of an opening, but it eases you into it before it starts, bringing out the big guns, so to speak. But yeah, and of course the sequence ends with Jack, coming up with the idea because the ship is, I think the rudder is
shot away.
Shot away. So
yeah, improvised stern chaser. Yes.
Yeah, so they have the smaller ships drag them into the heavy fog, and they're able to.
Yeah. And I love this line: "Pull like you're pulling a Frenchman off your mother." It's like one of those.
So that I read that from the Richard Woodman series. I don't know if it was Brig of War, but it's Nathaniel Drinkwater series by Richard Woodman. So I've read that series, and that's where I remember that from. And I was like, I am using that forever. I'm like, I'm using that forever for the rest of my life.
Yeah, and
four-parter. Yeah,
and I love it because a lot of what this sequence does is, I like to call this basically character development through action. And I think that another film that does that beautifully for the entire run of its film is Mad Max Fury Road, where that's a film where it's nonstop action, but you find out a lot about the characters during that action. And this opening sequence accomplishes a lot of that because you find out the dynamics between certain characters throughout the series. I think one of my favorite parts is where, Jack is, sort of walking at the beginning of the sequence. He's, walking through the ship after that initial hit, and he says, "Mr. Allen, come up on the wind," and then Mr. Allen, the sailing master, comes up next to him and says, "On the wind, sir," and he says, "Lay me alongside her," the pistol shot or something to that effect. And it's showing that, who Mr. Allen is, sort of what their rapport is, what the fact that he's sailing master, but he's not necessarily a military expert. And it's just little moments like that I think convey a lot of the relationships in this opening. But having talked about this opening sequence, I do want to dive in and talk about some of the character dynamics throughout this film. Let's just start with the main course, which is the wonderful relationship between Jack Aubrey and Stephen Maturin, because I've got to be honest, if there's a reason why I love this movie, it's Russell Crowe and Paul Bettany's interactions throughout.
You mean Kirk and Spock?
Yeah.
Some people call this the best Star Trek movie that there ever was.
Yeah. I'm just really annoyed that Paul Bettany wasn't nominated for Best Supporting Actor for this film.
Oh, he should have been.
I mean, this was the year, like, obviously I had no complaints about how Return of the King did at the Oscars, but
I do.
But the
Cleaned
fact,
up? You mean how it cleaned up?
yeah, but the fact that it that they failed to get Best Supporting Actor nomination for Sean Astin, was a problem for me. And then same thing goes for this film with Paul Bettany. I had two of my favorite films that should have absolutely gotten Best Supporting Actor nominations, and they didn't. And I don't think Paul Bettany has ever been nominated for an Oscar unless I'm wrong. And
he's an incredible actor. He's so good. And Russell Crowe and Paul Bettany.
If I had a table in front of me, I would flip it right now.
Yeah. Yeah, I also love their on-screen, their character relationship. It's so good. Like you can tell, like they're friends who, like, despite having not everything in common, they're still very good friends and respect each other a whole lot. Even though they know that they have very different personalities and interests and just fundamentally who they are. And I love how they come together with music. In the books, this is actually how they met. I mentioned it in the chat a while back, but they were at they were both going to a concert and happened to be seated next to each other. And they were watching a quartet performing. And Aubrey was tapping his foot to the beat. And Maturin, seated next to him, says, "If you must tap your foot to the beat, will you just at least try to keep the same tempo as the music?" And Aubrey was like totally butthurt about it and thought, "Oh, what a sour fellow." But then he was thinking about him afterwards, and they ran into each other later at the pub and apologized to each other and found that they both like to play music. Aubrey the violin and Maturin the cello. And one of them says, I think it was Maturin who says, "Oh, yes, I do like to torture a cello from time to time." I love that turn of phrase. I use it myself now when I talk about playing the cello because I play as well. And I have to say, like, the actor's commitment to learning those instruments is probably the best that I have ever seen. Like, there is vibrato when there's actually vibrato. Their fingers are in the right place. Even when Maturin is chording on the cello, when he's playing it like a guitar, like he's barring the right strings. And they learned these instruments. They took lessons and they said, well, we were dubbed over. And if you heard actually what we were playing, we had our fingers in the right places, but you didn't want to hear what we were playing because it didn't sound very good, which is fine. But it's so believable. And that like makes so much of a difference to me as a musician. I remember seeing Mary, Queen of Scots a few years ago, and I thought it was okay. And then they had like this minstrel, like fiddler guy who was playing violin, and he obviously, like, the actor didn't have any training in it. His fingers weren't where they were supposed to be. There's vibrato happening when you didn't see his fingers moving. I was like, I don't believe in this movie anymore. I don't believe. So that's like my rant right there. But I love the music selected for this, and I love their relationship expressed through that music interest they have.
See, there's a lot of times where I wish I knew how to play a musical instrument, but but maybe it's for the better if it would take me out of a lot of films. But yeah, I mean, the whole thing with them playing music together, it's a lot of that is sort of the beating heart of the film. And again, I hate to jump to the ending, but that whole final sequence is so beautiful once they start playing and the music is playing over, the final beats and quarters sequence. And then you've got that shot of, the ship on the water as it pulls back. And that piece of music was written by Luigi Boccherini.
He's like one of my favorite composers. It's an incredible piece.
When I got that soundtrack, and yes, I have it right here. I played that over and over again, just because it became one of my favorite pieces of music after seeing this film.
Yeah, Boccherini is great. I recommend all his stuff.
Yeah, and there's, you know, lots of different pieces throughout the film. I think some of the other people on here, and Vaughan Williams, Wolfgang Amadeus Mozart, J.S. Bach, Johann Sebastian Bach. I don't know why I didn't know that just then. I should have. But yeah, it's beautiful music. And this is the one instance where normally I go on about how important, like, I think a score, the best scores are more than just setting the mood. But in the case of this film, I think that the underscore is very successful in building tension and making you, you know, sort of feel the desperate moments, you know, that these characters go through, and then it's left to I think the classical music to really sell the emotional moments of the film, and I think it does that beautifully. But yeah, if the whole movie was just Russell Crowe and Paul Bettany, you know, playing their musical instruments, that would have been fine with me, because it's their friendship is great. And yeah, they are very different people, but they share that love of music and they have a deep friendship, which, you know, there's moments throughout this film that make me, you know, weep, just like when, you know, you get to the part where Stephen has been shot, and then and Jack makes the decision to go back to the Galapagos Islands so that he can be on land, you know, while they're doing the surgery, and to just stay there for
oh my
a week.
God, John, I have goosebumps just thinking of that. Oh my gosh.
I would have goosebumps, but I'm actually kind of overheating right now. My wool coat. It's gonna have to come off, but I'm like waiting for the right moment.
Yeah, like I could honestly go through each and every one of their scenes and just talk about how great it is. I love their argument towards the middle of the film, which really, when I was younger, I just looked at it as these are two men with very different priorities. Sort of, you know, Jack obviously has to follow the ship, the French ship, the Acheron, you know, wherever it goes. But he had made a promise to Stephen that he get to, you know, walk around the Galapagos Islands and research and find out all about all these, you know, new species. There's a line that Stephen says where, you know, they're just looking through the spyglass, you know, onto the islands, and his line is 2 new species in as many minutes. And, you know, you can just see how much he loves that. But what's really interesting upon rewatching this film is how it's really an argument about sort of, you know, warfare versus, you know, sort of, you know, concern and interest in the natural world.
Mm-hmm. Well, there's that, and there's also, like, you know, the hard side of war, actually the fighting tactics, the sword play, the weather gauge, and the positioning of the boats, and being outclassed by another. But then there's like the soft side of it too, which Aubrey learns from Maturin. Like, he's the one who provides him the information on this insect that can disguise himself, and by using like both those like different sides, you know, which are kind of like representative of different sides of humanity and opposite things, like dark and light, and masculinity and femininity. We could argue that too. It's like that's where we actually progress. It's the same duality as A Song of Ice and Fire. Ooh.
I think I've heard of that somewhere.
Anyway, yeah.
Well,
Sorry,
sorry, Shakes, go ahead if you had
something.
Oh, no,
I have a tendency to skip all over the place when we're doing these kinds of things, so I apologize for that.
No, it's fine. I was about to say, too, what I think is really important about their friendship is the fact that Stephen is able to challenge the kind of leadership that Aubrey is putting out there. And you have so many instances when he is questioning his decisions in regards to the entire mission itself, in regards to what is best for certain individuals that are facing consequences for insubordination. And I honestly think this entire movie is a really great case study on what it means to be an effective leader and how you should lead people. There are so many instances from when Aubrey is with the midshipmen and he's, training them on deck, and to when he's lecturing Hollam in his cabin. And it's just constantly, you see throughout the movie, him trying to lead the midshipmen and the sailors that are under his command to the best of his ability. And countering that, you have Stephen, who is constantly there questioning his decisions, but also questioning what kind of leader do you want to be and what are the consequences of the actions and the decisions that you make going to be. And it speaks a lot, too, that as a captain, he's even allowing himself to be questioned. And I think that's a testament to how strong their friendship is.
Mm-hmm. That's fantastic, Laura. I absolutely agree.
In the books, Stephen helps keep a lot of Jack's more negative impulses. Stephen has actually pulled Jack out of a lot of crap in the books. Jack should be lucky that Stephen has been there for him as many times as he had. But like Lauren would know that in the first book, Master and Commander, you have, and John, I think you will really enjoy the books, because when it comes to character analysis, Stephen Maturin does that for everyone in the book. He keeps a journal throughout his work, and I'm going to use work because he does character analysis. And later on in the dinner scene where they're actually talking about Lord Nelson, Stephen says he is the exception to authority corrupts. In the first book, Master and Commander, Stephen has this inner monologue about how authority pretty much kills the child or the love of life and fun in anyone who is overburdened with authority. In the books, Stephen actually took part in a small failed rebellion in Ireland, and that is something that they are discussing when they're having their argument. When it comes to Stephen's insight, for me, that you've got the naval action, of course, but when it comes to a life reflection or a reflection on the world, I prefer Stephen's point of view overall. Book version of Jack, he's not as lovable as Russell Crowe. Let's just put it that way.
I was disappointed about that. I know what you mean.
It's like, oh man, you didn't get advanced. Maybe like the guy who's in charge of your advancement, maybe you shouldn't sleep with his wife. Like,
he's so he's concerned about his promotion all throughout the book. It's kind of a turnoff.
But he's banging his superior's wife. Like, can you maybe not do that? Perhaps did that not occur to you? So so book version of Jack it's not Russell Crowe. Oh,
are you saying that for a big motion picture they made the Russell Crowe version more appealing? That's shocking.
Let's just go with let's just go with book Tyrion, Peter Dinklage. Like, okay, that's kind of where we are. So Peter Dinklage, Tyrion, book Tyrion.
Right.
So that's kind of what we're dealing with here with Jack. Not that Jack is not lovable. When they are on the coast of South America and they're dropping off a mail packet, and they're trading, that whole trade scene was fantastic as well. The natives are coming out in their dugout canoes, they're doing trades, they're bartering back and forth, and then the actual people of color in the movie, which was kind of disappointing, other than Black Bill helping Killick out. When you have the very pretty girl in the boat twirling her little parasol and Jack looking down at her, like, I was like, there's book Jack right there. There he is.
And then of course, in the very next moment, he's writing a letter to his wife.
Yeah.
So while he's
I have something to add to this.
While he's looking at her, you can hear the bosun barking at everybody like, "This is a king's ship. Get get your act together. Stop acting like idiots. And I'm just like, I know what's going through his head.
Yeah, and apparently
Jack's a slut.
Is Slutty Jack.
Yes.
Lucky Jack. That's
Lucky Jack is also Slutty Jack.
But I was reading, like, I don't know, just some trivia stuff about this movie to see like what I had missed, the knowledge that I had missed. And apparently at some point in the development process, they were considering having a love interest for Jack, and they were considering Keira Knightley for that role. So you would enjoy that. That would have made it so much better for you, John.
Okay, first of all, how did I not know this?
I didn't know that either. Wow.
This is just like some factoid that I read. So
second of all, for shame, they could have made this movie so much better. No. But in all honesty, for obviously, you always want to see a, diverse cast, but given that, what would be the actual situation on on this ship, I'm actually kind of glad that they didn't bring in a love interest just for the sake of having one, because I think one of the greatest things about this movie is showing these bonds between the men on the ship, and especially going back to Jack and Stephen's friendship. Not that you don't see depictions of sort of male friendships on here, but this has such it's a much more sort of open and emotional relationship between men than I think you usually get in films. And I think it's the opposite of that. Not that there's plenty of issues, moments in this movie which you probably categorize as toxic masculinity, but I don't think their friendship would fall under. I think it's a wonderful friendship.
That toxic masculinity is confronted too, by the naturalism and the Aubrey having to listen to Maturin and having to give up his pursuit of the Acheron to bring his friend to the island, to the Galapagos, so that they can do that surgery and let him heal. I mean, there's place for healing as well in this movie about war. So I think that there's a good balance.
Name a shrub after me.
Oh, you stole it from me.
It's prickly and hard to eradicate.
I love that.
Name a shrub after me.
We're on the same wavelength.
John, also the books, their bromance or their relationship is so pure and lovely in the book, and there's no, as far as like more flowery language that we're used to in the 21st century, it's actually really nice because they are very straightforward with each other, which is so refreshing when it comes to guys who are afraid, or the masculine perception of don't show your feelings. They are very straightforward with each other about almost everything they're thinking and feeling throughout the books.
Yeah, it's shocking to me that I haven't read them yet, and I've got to fix that, because with as much as I love this movie, I know I would just love to dive in.
Can we go into the Nagel and Warley bringing in the ship model of the
please
Acheron?
geek out on that. I would love to hear your thoughts.
Okay, that's the bloody USS Constitution. He said Boston built. Why would a French ship be built in Boston unless it was a prize of war? But yeah, when they are describing the way that the hull is built, with it double planked with live oak, and then I think it was like yellow oak, that is that's going to be White Oak. It was Live Oak and White Oak. That is going to pretty much what the Master Allen was saying, and pretty much things that they were observing in that first engagement was like, our shot was not penetrating that hull. It was essentially bouncing off. That's what happened with the Constitution's engagement. That's why she's referred to as Old Ironsides. Because of the rigidness of the hull.
So it could be that like Worley didn't see this exact ship being built in Boston, but this is, I don't know, maybe whoever was a part of the construction
specifically says
over to their friend in France, and
he specifically said, I watched this ship, or my cousin who was getting married in Boston watched this ship being built, and this is what he described.
Yeah. In my head, though, I always have my own headcanon for things, and I'm like, well, unreliable narrator, you know, everybody wants to be their own star of the show. So
when Jack was showing it to his fellow officers, he was like, thank goodness for Warley's cousin getting married. It was one of those lovely moments.
Mm-hmm. And then another favorite line of mine in that moment is, that's the future. What a fascinating modern age we live in. It's just, it's funny.
Oh, I know. It's one of the best lines. I use it all the time. Fascinating.
When they're being, what Laura was saying about the training of the midshipmen on the quarterdeck while they're being pursued by the Acheron, I thought that was such a lovely moment when Jack is trying to keep them focused on the sextants. They are doing a noon sighting. So what they're doing is measuring, they can tell as the sun appears on the horizon at zenith, that is local apparent noon. So he tells Hollam, this is your class, call noon. So when you observe the sun reach its highest point in the sky, as it appears to descend, that's noon. That is the start of the noon watch. That is when a sailor's day essentially kind of starts. So it's something that is done on a daily basis, as long as the weather wasn't icky, as long as it's not too cloudy and you can actually sight the sun. That is something that is done. And I would like to get into the lieutenant's exam later on if we talk about Hollam.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
We should absolutely talk about Hollam.
Laura, did you have anything you wanted to say about anything?
Oh, I'll just add with the whole comment about why is a friendship being built in Boston. I remember seeing an interview that they did with Peter Weir where he was questioning why that was put in there in that way and is that accurate. And to Kelly's point of what she said about that being the Constitution, she's absolutely correct. And they made the decision to make what the ship that Jack Aubrey is pursuing a friendship in the movie because the director and the producers were so concerned with putting an American ship in this film and how audiences would respond to that in America having to see themselves as a potential enemy. And I could say a lot about that and how weak-minded I think that makes us sound.
Because it could have very well been like War of 1812 sort of a thing, but they decided to.
But yeah,
but we can collectively hate the French.
Well, and especially a reminder.
It would seem.
Well, and also this was in 2003. We were still in the Bush presidency, and there were a lot of anti-French feelings amongst some sections of the American populace. I won't say which ones. It should be fairly obvious.
There's a lot of patriotism we were trying to keep at a high as we were going into s'mores.
So much to the point that I'll mention Pirates of the Caribbean again. Same year, there's even a line in there where somebody says, "What madman thought up parlay?" and Jack Sparrow goes, "That would be the French." It's like everybody was taking digs at the French at this point. We had our freedom fries and all that stuff. So I don't find it terribly surprising, even if it is disappointing.
No, it's not. It's just, it's funny that like Americans' pride is like that soft and vulnerable, that like such a big decision was made to change that. Yeah, and I like, if we can pull up a comment that I see from Micah, just about how people would get flustered over America being the enemy. That's exactly why he did it. But it's crazy that we have to make that big of a change, you know, and change something in terms of the historical accuracy, just because our pride is that easily wounded. I mean, I get the time period, but I don't know.
It wasn't even an American-made movie. It was British, Australian or British made. And yeah, I mean, it makes sense they wanted to appeal to a bigger audience. I mean, if we wanted something to really get big in China, we probably wouldn't be like, you know, saying shit about them. But I don't know, like America is like where Hollywood is and everything. So it does make sense to me on one level, like know your audience kind of a thing. And I'm kind of glad that they made the choice they did, because maybe it would have hurt reception. I still would have loved it, but I don't know. It is a good point though.
Yeah. I just think it's funny because we have no qualms ever about making the British the enemy over and over and over again.
Yeah.
So
we're not the enemy. Our empire is still at its height. We're in our prime.
Yeah.
Weatherly stiff and fast.
And with that, I'm going to take a break to do our mid-roll. Yeah, so I actually, guys, I'll be taking next Saturday off. I won't be having a stream, but I am going to, of course, be doing Here Be Dragons. And next Sunday at 6 p.m., we're going to be doing an anniversary stream. So Stephen, Nessie, and myself will be celebrating the past year that we've been doing Here Be Dragons, as well as our individual streams, John Webster Film. And oh my God, why is my mind drawing a blank? The Unspun Yarn. I'm so sorry, Nessie. I know the name of your channel.
Sorry, Nessie.
But yeah, so join us for that. It's going to be a lot of fun. And meanwhile, I'm going to try and cook something up for the next week for this channel. I am thinking about taking some people's advice and looking for something that either I don't like or something that is an extreme guilty pleasure, and I know it's bad regardless of how much I like it. So we'll be doing that, and I guess I'll go ahead and announce right now, since it's the next thing that I know I'll be doing. I don't have a guest lined up yet, but on October 31st, which is on Halloween, I will be doing a stream about The Nightmare Before Christmas. So make sure that you guys are ready for that. Yeah, so why don't you guys, if do you guys have anything going on that you want to go ahead and plug?
I don't really. I'm just kind of hanging out.
What she said.
Yeah.
Good job, all you guys being productive.
Yeah. When John, when John or someone asks me, "Hey, when are we on a stream?" and I'm like, "Yeah." Kind of what I do. Yeah. John, when we did the terror stream, that was on the anniversary of essentially the discovery of the wreckage of the Terror. And if only we could have waited until like October 21st, it would be the anniversary of Trafalgar.
Ooh, that would have been cool.
Yeah, but we did do it on the day that the ships went missing. And I
yes,
feel
or the ships went technically they got stuck in the ice apparently that date, and I was just like, this is creepy.
I know. And
did you talk about the HBD stream tomorrow?
I'll go ahead and mention it, even though I'm probably not that clear on what it is, because I know nothing about Dungeons and Dragons, but
that's right.
But But Stephen will be doing a stream about, I believe, the intersection of Dungeons and Dragons with Lord of the Rings, which it's hilarious that I'm not involved in something Lord of the Rings related. But honestly, I'd be completely lost with the Dungeons and Dragons portions of that talk. So I am more than happy to let Stephen handle that and leave me out of it. But yeah, definitely make sure you guys tune in for that tomorrow, because I'm sure they're going to have a bunch of fun talking about that, even if I won't understand a word of it. Okay, so I guess we'll go ahead and dive back into the movie. I guess, Kelly, since you brought up something related to it, we'll go ahead and talk about Hollam.
Yeah, it's time to talk about Hollam.
Well, I like the address of like mental health.
Mm-hmm.
Sorry, John. Go ahead. There was sorry.
No, it's just, I mean, I feel so bad for this guy because, you know, he seems to be, I mean, as Aubrey even says, he has good habits as a sailor. You know, so he's not, you know, it's not like he's terrible at his work, but he does lack self-confidence. But he's easily
it seems like it's just such a tragedy because he becomes like the weakest link on the ship during this time of their sail, when it seems like everything is going out of control. Or maybe not out of control, but they're just having a run of bad luck. Even Jack says, I've never known such a run of bad luck. And then just because sailors, when they're out at sea, I mean, everybody knows that sailors have some wild superstitions. And I think that must be in part due to like just being at sea for so long. I mean, you can elaborate on that if you want, Kelly, or fight me on it. I don't know. From what I know, there are some pretty crazy superstitions.
That's not true, is it, Kelly?
I'm about like 50% superstitious. Of course, I never used to be superstitious until I started sailing.
But it brings out something in you, you know, like, and I think it must just be like the how the weather, you can't predict it all the time, and you want to have something to hold on to, something to believe in, and it makes you feel like you have some sense of control. So the sailors start to notice, oh, you know, every time something bad has happened, Mr. Hollam has been on duty. He's been on watch. He was, you know, right as soon as he came down from the mizzen, then Worley, it snapped and Worley went over. Like every time this guy is on watch, every time he's anywhere, something bad happens near him. He's a Jonah. And it doesn't, of course you have, what's his name? Joe Place, who had the skull fracture, and he miraculously like regained consciousness, but now he's like spouting verses from the Bible, and that doesn't help things either. And he's like perpetuating the whole "this guy's a Jonah" thing. And
yeah, the guy who had serious brain injuries and somehow miraculously, you know, survived. I'm sure he's perfectly okay upstairs. Let's listen to him.
I mean that just like reinforces the whole superstitious belief thing. So like weird stuff happens out at sea.
Unfortunately, when it's really upsetting when Hollam has his breakdown and he's crying to the rest of the midshipmen, like he's just freaking out. And the next scene, Stephen is telling Jack, like, there's nothing physically wrong with him. He thinks he's cursed. And Jack knows exactly what he's saying. He says the sailors cannot abide a Jonah. And never mind the fact that when Worley did go overboard, when the mizzenmast parted and went by the board, Jack was warned by the master carpenter, Mr. Lamb, that the topmast was not going to take too much stress, but he set the damn sail anyway. So when they decided to take it in and the sail is flogging around, so that incident is blamed on Hollam, really?
Yeah.
That was really that.
Yeah,
that really,
it's bad luck.
As far as accountability, yeah.
Yeah, and I think that
it's
it's also like at a point when Jack is at his most arrogant, and he's got like this Captain Ahab level obsession with finding the Acheron and beating it, even though it's out of their class. And I feel like that arrogance, like coinciding with what's happening to the crew and Mr. Hollam, and him just sort of being identified as this Jonah, like those are things that are I don't know, I wouldn't say it's like a climax of the movie, but it's a certain inflection point which gets you to understand how people, like a little society on a ship, like humanity contained on a ship, which is they think of as their England, their home, their country, it could just break down. And thankfully, they begin to broaden their perspectives a little bit, evaluate what's important. But that's kind of like the very lowest part of the movie to me. Like, it's just, when Hollam dies. But I know, Kelly, you want to talk about that moment probably in the captain's cabin with Aubrey, or you were saying something about an exam. I don't remember the exam.
Okay, so
the one that he failed to pass.
Yes. The lieutenant's exam is something that midshipmen have to go through in order to break into the level of lieutenant. And a lieutenant can lead like a gun brig or a sloop of war and have the title of captain kind of as a courtesy. But you need to, as midshipmen, you have to pass the exam. Now, statistically, it was unlikely for midshipmen to fail. Even the most scrutinizing senior post captains, they had a fail rate of 5% of all the candidates. Now, the fact that Hollam, he says he is almost 30 years old, and he's still not lieutenant yet, boy, give up. Like, no. By the time if you are 25 or 26 and you have not gotten into past lieutenant, you need, if leadership is not for you, and I think Hollam could have saved face if he's a good seaman, he can demote himself down as far as actually being able to, live on a ship, provide for himself, and still retain some kind of dignity. He could become a bosun mate. He could work specifically with the sail rig and the sail crew. The thing is, most likely, Hollam is from a well-off family, which would have been very shameful for them. But at this point, there's no going back. You're not going to advance and save any. Okay, so I've got some stats here. Like, half the officers, when they get into lieutenant or clear into lieutenant, 50% of them are between 13 and 16. So when it comes to 20 plus year olds, it's about 10% when they first reach the level where they can go into their lieutenant's exam. So you're pretty much like a later teenager when you can become a lieutenant, if you're good. If you're really good, maybe like 14 or 15.
Like Calamy at the end of the movie was promoted to lieutenant posthumously.
Yes.
Well,
I love that. Yeah, I love the fact that his first command was that little raft.
I know.
What are they building?
Adorable.
Your first command. I'm like,
give him a few back slaps. You got this.
Yeah. When I first watched this movie, I was like, please don't lose this kid. He's too cute. Please.
But yeah, I mean, as an officer, though, it's hard because you have all these eyes on you. Like, what, 200 people on board that boat? And I mean, we were saying at the beginning how we've all, some of us, we feel like we have a bit of Mr. Hollam in us. And you definitely, as an officer, everybody has a Mr. Hollam moment where you fuck up, where you hesitate, and you just don't do something the way that you wish you had in hindsight, or the way that somebody else would have done it, a more Aubrey-like officer. And it's really easy to really get caught up over that moment, because you know that people see it, you know that they're judging you for it, and there is a certain perception of you, and people do treat you a little bit differently after you've had that egg on your face. And I think that Hollam is just an officer who's been stuck in that loop of just fucking up or not rising to the occasion. And it's just too hard for him to get out. He's really self-conscious of his officerly image. That's kind of what I get from it as an officer. I feel so much for Mr. Hollam. Really
when it comes to like not being able to get out of your own way.
Yeah.
That scene where Jack says, "I've never, known such a string of bad luck." Unfortunately, you have that really beautiful moment. This is going to sound awful, during Hollam's service, where Jack. So when he's handed the Bible, and it's on the page of Jonah, I'm just like, asshole, really? And he's just like, take this, thank you, and just like, thanks for nothing.
I wanted to smack the shit out of
yes
out of it. It was Killick.
It was
right?
Killick.
Who does that? I'm like, you ass.
Yeah.
Killick is even better in the books. If you guys love you some Killick, he's even better in the books.
I've only read the first one. I can't remember how much he was in that one, but
he's kind of fun to watch. But he's really the kind of person who I know I would not get along with in any shape or form.
He's one of those who's just a little bit, he's a little bit out there. He's got some stuff that he's working on in his head, or maybe should work on. And you've got to adjust the way that you respond to somebody like Killick, because they operate in a different way upstairs, is really the most that you can say.
When Jack was like, double ration of rum, and Killick is like, I was saving that.
Was saving that, but never mind.
Yeah. It's like,
doesn't even like the music. Oh, scratch it all the time.
Yeah. Scrape.
It's like, yeah, that's what I'm saying. It's someone like trying to be like, get over it, all right?
But then they get their wind after the funeral. So,
yeah, but Jack is very, like, Jack knows, the way this person is. If Todd is still in the chat, he can tell you we sail with someone similar to Killick, or at least we used to. She hasn't come with us recently, but and he knows what we're talking about. But like, this is the way that, this is just the personality that this person has. They don't mean anything by it when they say jackass stuff. They're not actually jackass. They just tend to say things like that.
It's just how they are. But, everybody knows a Killick. Everybody. And certain professions will attract them more than others.
Yeah. Thankfully, he's got a little bit more leeway. Ooh, nautical term. Being the captain's steward specifically.
Dolorous Killick, I love it. Yeah. Actually, he is very much like a Dolorous Ed type of character, isn't he? I mean, Ed is a bit more warm, but
yeah, and honestly, a lot of these guys are sort of, lovable dicks, as we'll say, but yeah, that whole thing with Hollam and the Jonah is a sort of sore point for me as relates to a few of these characters, because it doesn't mean that you're not with them through the rest of the film, but it is a sort of dark edge to many of them. I really don't like that moment when he hands the Bible to Jack. And then the fact that they do get their wind, a couple minutes later,
John,
I'm like,
John, that's after Jack asks specifically. He asks for Hollam's forgiveness and for God's forgiveness for failing, and I think the wind was Hollam forgiving them.
Oh,
maybe not Killick.
I like thinking of it that way.
Yeah,
I prefer.
But yeah.
I prefer that way of thinking. I just don't think that many of the crew saw it that way.
Yeah.
And they probably saw it as confirmation of that they were right, and that just makes me really sad.
It does make me sad too, but I'm glad that they were able to rally around something and get their shit together, because then once they did get their shit together, the next time they had a tragedy on board, you know, Stephen Maturin getting shot, they could have just left him to die and kept pursuing the Acheron. But I don't know. I feel like there was kind of a lesson learned from Hollam. Like, maybe not overtly, it wasn't said, but I don't know. Like, I feel like Mr. Hollam, he could have found his place in the Navy. He could have found his place on board a royal ship. Maybe not been a Jack Aubrey type of officer, but more like a Maturin type, like somebody who's a good listener and offers like more of a human perspective, you know, like a soft sort of a quiet leadership. You know what I mean? And he wasn't really
Blakeney with that role.
Yeah, and Blakeney, it looks like he's going to be set up to have that opportunity under the tutelage of Maturin, both Maturin and Aubrey. So I really feel like that's kind of our happy ending to the Hollam story. Like, it didn't quite work out for Hollam, but maybe it will for someone like Blakeney.
Yeah, it's funny, though, that you were just sort of comparing Hollam to Maturin. Because actually I was thinking earlier when I was rewatching this again today that I think it sort of comes down to it's not just the confidence that you know, I mean, everybody would like to think that, you know, you're capable of having enough confidence in yourself to sort of rise yourself up. But sometimes you do need people to be there for you. And I think that nobody's there for Hollam. Yeah. And it's funny because it's, as I said before, I feel like this is a movie that I kind of grow with. And each time I go back to it, I kind of get something different from it. And if I felt, you know, that there were parts of myself that were similar to Hollam when I was younger, you know, like in 2003, I was in my late teens. Now watching it, especially having, you know, within the past year, especially made so many friends, I do feel more like Stephen now, someone who has very sort of, you know, interests that maybe lie outside of, you know, maybe some of the people that he socializes with, but still feeling like part of a group. So it's interesting for me, having grown with this film and seeing how parts of my own personality have changed. But I was also going to say that you mentioned that the film now jumps to Stephen getting shot, and one thing about this movie is that there are parts of it that feel a bit episodic, in that we go from sort of this scenario to another scenario. And I couldn't help thinking today, like, if this was made today, it would very obviously be a TV miniseries. Rather than a film, because they don't make films like this anymore.
It would have done really well in the golden age of television, I feel.
Yeah. Laura, you've been quiet for a little bit. Is there anything you want to?
All had just wonderful things to say. I'm just enjoying listening. I will say, just going and jumping backwards a second to Hollam. Yeah, heartbreaking how that character ended. But if you're paying attention, in my mind, his ending was tragic, but also inevitable in a way. And it was detrimentally, I think, to some extent, his own doing as well, because we have that one scene where he is singing with the sailors, the Spanish ladies, and when he's called into Jack Aubrey's cabin, he gets scolded for that, because he tells them, you're not supposed to be fraternizing with these sailors. And it doesn't mean that you have to be a tyrant, but that's not what your position is in a leadership role. You shouldn't be doing that. And you can see how he's trying to just imbibe Hollam with like some semblance of leadership and give him the courage to go forth with that. But he's not even really strong enough to accept the advice that's being passed on to him. And I think Jack Aubrey knows it when he can see, like, my words are kind of just falling on deaf ears right now. And this man is unfortunately not really getting it. And he is just doomed to fail in that moment. And I think Jack Aubrey knows it. And I think what happens immediately afterwards with his suicide is just a fallout of, like he says during his funeral, just some people, some men never become the men that they aspired to or hope to be.
Yeah, it's been one of my favorite. It's been one of my favorite lines for years. Jack. I think the line is, "This simple truth is, not all of us become the men we once hoped we might be. We're all God's creatures," and it's just, I like that being. Again, sort of being angry at much of the crew, it's kind of hopefully shaming them a little bit into realizing, all were being really horrible, and it resulted in this. But yeah, Laurie, you mentioned that moment when he's in Aubrey's office, and when the words are, either falling on deaf ears or they're just.
Yeah, and
they aren't the words that Hollam would be receptive to, and I think one kind of wishes that Jack was able sort of to deal with imparting something onto this kind of man for this type of scenario. I don't think he's accustomed to it, and I think he's used to dealing with people who can maybe take that and those kinds of words and do something with it, and Hollam's just not that guy. And there's an acknowledgement of that where after Hollam sort of weakly says courage, strength, and like he's hearing him, but he's obviously not. And Jack's like, "Oh, it's a damn unfortunate business, Hollam."
I know, and it's just like in that moment, Aubrey is sort of acknowledging how unlucky it all is. I mean, unfortunate, unlucky, and Hollam is part of this run of bad luck. He's like the scapegoat in all of this, and I love the cinematography, the filming of that scene. My mom and I were watching it last night, and she was the one who pointed it out, that you could see. So the positioning of Aubrey, like his windows are behind him, and there's this bright light coming in, and it's like the camera is looking up at him, and he just seems to be a lot bigger in that shot and much taller, just even for that angle. And then Hollam is kind of in the shadows, and it's like this thing that he can't aspire to be. So it was a really interesting shot in that scene, I thought. But there's another thing I wanted to bring up shortly. Might be a little bit of a tangent, but related to this. So
I'm sorry, Shakes, but as you know, on this channel and on Here Be Dragons, we do not condone tangents of any kind. But you know what?
No rants or tangents here.
Okay, but it's a good one. So I don't know if you guys have seen the deleted scenes. But among them, one of the ones that I found the most interesting and that I wish had been in the movie, and it maybe could have been after Hollam died, maybe that's when it was timed for, but there's this one scene where they hear this sea monster in the darkness, and this thing like just screaming and whining, and like it's spooking everybody out, and Aubrey's even like, tell the men they can sleep with their lanterns on tonight, because everybody is that spooked by this sea monster out there. And it reminds me a bit of The Terror in a way, that supernatural element, kind of out there in the water, which is of course representative of, just the unknown in nature, in this territory that humanity has this vanity to encroach upon. And here is nature just ready to fuck you over and swallow you up. and bring you down to Davy's locker. But I don't know. I think that that would have been so well placed. And I think it does take place in the doldrums, actually, when they're in the doldrums, probably before Hollam dies. And that might have been something else that was added to the whole run of bad luck soup that they had. But I don't know. I really liked that scene in particular. I don't know if you guys watched any of the other deleted scenes.
I'm sure I did at some point, but it probably been a lot of years. But this is a good moment to, I'll just say what it is. It's showing off. But I actually have this beautiful collector's edition DVD that I was lucky enough to have signed by Billy Boyd, who plays Barrett Bondon in this, which it's not a huge role that he plays, but from what I understand, he's an important character in the books. But another reason why I'm really looking forward to reading the books when I have a chance. But I got to go see him play with his band in New York in 2009. So I was happy to get that, and I also was happy enough to get a picture with him, and it's me with my full head of hair. So, so that's a picture that I enjoy looking at for multiple reasons. But, but yeah. Yeah. So moving on. God, I had something I was gonna. Yeah, go ahead.
Can we talk a little bit about Stephen getting shot?
Yes.
So the albatross. Any Rime of the Ancient Mariner fans out there?
Right.
Like, if you've ever read the Rime of the Ancient Mariner poem, you know, don't kill the freaking albatross. What's wrong with you? Just don't be shooting at birds unless you're starving. Just don't shoot at the birds. Leave the birds alone. Barrett is the best. Yes.
Yeah.
BB, Barrett Bondon.
And it's funny because also in the deleted scenes, there were many more scenes of what's his name? Is it Mr. Howard, the lead Marine guy? I think it is Mr. Howard. And he was shooting at all these birds and pretty much anything that would move. And Stephen even told him, he was like, are you really just shooting at anything that's moving here? Because he was tired of it. Of course, it's the naturalist. He doesn't want stuff to be shot. And he was shooting this weird octopus looking thing in the water. And Stephen was like, we can't even eat it. And we can't, we're not even going to use that. Why are you shooting it? Are you just for fun? And then later when you hear the monster screaming at night, Stephen's like, yeah, that's probably that thing's mother.
So I have not seen any of these deleted scenes.
Oh man, it's on YouTube. Awesome. But he is being so snarky to Mr. Howard, and I would have loved some of those to be put in there too, because it just builds that animosity up a little bit, or has something of a relationship between them before Maturin gets shot, and then Howard feels fucking awful.
Yeah, but no one labeled him a Jonah, did they? No. Yeah, but yeah, it's just like there was a okay, I want to rewind a little bit and talk about, again, commenting about how great the acting. The action's good too. The acting that the sergeant, the Marine sergeant, you could tell he was absolutely devastated, and he was just like, oh my God, doctor, I'm so sorry. And I think there's also, at least in, future scenes, there's no hard feelings between them, which is, because I'm a small person. I'd be freaking bitter. I would not be so forgiving, but okay, I'm going to stop calling him Stephen, because I'm going to call him
No, keep calling him Stephen.
No, I want to keep talking about how Stephen gets shot.
Stephen getting shot. So The scenes between Jack and Blakeney, when Blakeney was, and John and I talked about this during the terror stream, the scene where Maturin takes Blakeney's arm off. The amputation scene was just so, it was tender. I know that sounds absolutely ridiculous and graphic, but it was a very sweet scene. And then following, when Jack brings in his book on Nelson's victories, and so the camera stays on Jack's face as Blakeney is flipping through it and asking him questions. And Russell Crowe, oh my God, you can just see, like, he's looking at him and blinking, and you could tell, like, he cares so much for this kid, and it's so sweet. That those little moments, and he's answering his questions, all of his curiosities, and he's very jovial with them. But the way when he looks down at Blakeney, and he's just kind of like, he's kind of like got this weird smile going, and he's blinking, and oh my gosh, it's so sweet.
I know, it's so fatherly towards them, even though they are, like we were saying at the beginning, even these young boys have to pull their weight and do all the stuff that the grown men are doing. But there's still very much a fatherly relationship between those midshipmen, those young ones, and Jack.
I do want to take a moment to really just praise the young actor. His name is Max Perkis, who I've spoken about before when Nessie and I did our stream on Rome, because he played Octavian in that series, and he's just so good. It's kind of frustrating because on the one hand, you want people obviously to be free to go and live their lives however they see fit, but it is such a shame that young actor doesn't seem to have wanted to continue on acting, because I haven't seen him really in anything beyond this and Rome, but he's just seems like one of those natural talents on screen. And just his relationships.
How dare him?
Yeah, I know. But he has so many great relationships in this movie. Him and Aubrey, and him and Stephen, as well as with Mr. Hollam. That breaks my heart, that last scene with Hollam, when where Hollam says, "You've always been very kind to me," and that and Blakeney gives him that smile, and then he says, "Goodbye, Blakeney," and it's just makes me cry. And so that young actor really got a lot of fantastic stuff to play in this film, and definitely one of the standouts for me.
Do they put the last stitch through your nose? Don't put it through my nose. And then, of course, spoilers, at the end, Calamy, he's sewing up Calamy's bag.
That was also heartbreaking, because I thought Calamy and Blakeney, that's another just really great relationship, especially when he gets promoted to lieutenant, and he's just congratulating him, and I think you think that Calamy's going to be okay, and then at the end of the movie, when he's not, that's rough. And you see how it affects Blakeney too, when he goes back to Stephen just for comfort, because he just doesn't know how to process that loss.
The thing that breaks my heart about Calamy is the fact that you have that moment of him freeing the whalers, and then you don't see him again until Aubrey comes upon his body. And it's almost a Game of Thrones-ish kind of way to deliver a character's death. It's like, damn it, he was alive and vibrant a second ago.
I love how there's also that tenderness when he's sewing up the bag with Calamy in it, and he can't do it all himself because he only has the one arm, and so he asks that crew member whose name I forgot. He said, can you help me? And I love that, especially with Ray Vaughan Williams' Fantasia on a Theme by Thomas Tallis in the background. It's so poignant. And can you help me? Like, nobody can do this on their own. They have to ask for help. And you can just tell that Blakeney is going to be a fantastic commander someday. And he's learning how to achieve that balance, you know, that it's sort of fighting naturalist sort of thing. And then he goes down to seek solace in Maturin's cabin, and they just sort of work in silence on cataloging their specimens and stuff. And it's so good.
Can I ask what song was playing when Nagel went overboard? I'm sorry, Warley went overboard.
It's the same
one. It's Fantasia on a Theme by Thomas Tallis. It's on a theme by Thomas Tallis, who is a medieval composer, but the arrangement, like that specific piece, is by a composer named Ralph Vaughan Williams. Okay. And that's spelled like Ralph, but it's pronounced Rafe. It's a gorgeous, gorgeous piece.
Oh my gosh, like I bawl my eyes out. I was like, okay, what's happening in the scene, and then the music. Oh my gosh, I was like hysterical.
It's almost not fair how much good music they chose for this movie. It's like they just chose these all-star composers with some of their best music to put into this movie. Like nobody else could have done this in a movie. Like it just would have been like too much. But that piece, like a lot of people, for them, like that's their favorite piece ever. And same with Prelude to the Bach suites, the first Bach suite, and G major by Bach. I already said Bach. But that one that was playing while they were going to while they were arriving at the Galapagos. I mean, that's that's like the cello national anthem, pretty much. Like we stand up and we put our hands on our hearts when we hear that.
I did really notice after this film came out, I started to notice an increased use of that piece in not just movies, but also television commercials.
Yeah, the thing is that it's always been extremely famous since the Bach suites were rediscovered by Pablo Casals, but that movie definitely did prop it up quite a bit. And then you have like the pieces that they played in the cabin by Mozart and Corelli, and the one at the end by Boccherini. It's like they just chose so many good pieces of music. It was like this had an Amadeus level soundtrack to it, which is it's kind of unfair to compare it to, because that was like all Mozart. But this is like one of my favorite soundtracks ever. And they also threw in the sea shanties, which you gotta have, and they chose really good ones for that. Love it.
Yeah, it's almost like it's a good idea to put classical music into. Who would have guessed?
There are too many good ideas in this movie. I think
too
that's
many.
What's wrong. Yes,
that's the worst thing about this movie.
That's why it did not do as well as we wanted it to in the box office. Okay, and who wants? We definitely want to talk about the battle.
You start.
The taking of the prize.
I will just say, like, as much as the battle itself is great, I love all the stuff leading up to it. I love that. God, if I go too far back, I'm going to want to talk about some other stuff too, because I love the whole sequence when Stephen finally gets to walk on the Galapagos Islands. But as it relates to the battle, there's that great moment where he, finds the beetle and is looking at it, and then the focus and the shot changes, so you see the ship, and the way he just looks, he's like, of course, and then you have when he and Blakeney talk about the insect that disguises itself as a stick, and that giving Jack the idea to disguise the surprise. And then he's having that exchange with Stephen where he says, I intend to take more of an interest in nature from now on. And Stephen just is like completely innocently going, really? And he goes, yes, I had no idea that a study of nature could advance the art of naval warfare. He's like, oh, I see. But yeah, and the actual battle is just and you have that when Jack is giving that speech to his men, and I think it's an incredibly well-written speech. And again, I'm going to, as much as I insist that I don't care about the Oscars, I'm still going to rant about the fact that this film was also not nominated for Best Adapted Screenplay, which is insane. But, it is what it is. But, I love his whole speech. And then he ends with that great line, after all, surprise is on our side. And no, I like
Yeah, I think that it's clever how they had like a big battle at the beginning and a big battle at the end. They're kind of like bookends to the movie. And it thought like the first battle was impressive, but the second battle outdoes it in many ways. It's different, but man, the CGI. I'm so glad that I like watching it now. It doesn't feel like it's aged because they did it so well.
Good point. Yeah.
But tell us what went wrong in it, Kelly.
Nothing. Absolutely nothing.
Cool.
No, the was like,
that,
Lauren, you guys, like, as far as officers, like, you should know, man, do y'all love puns? Man, it's just sailors and like service members, like just the puns, like
he who would pun would pick a pocket.
As far as like, Shakespeare,
we haven't even talked about weevils yet.
Oh.
I was about to say the fact that the weevils haven't come up yet is
the lesser of two weevils.
Yeah, the weevils thing, yeah, it's like just that should have made it into the Oscars. Damn it.
But
so I want to talk about the that's the pun groan. That's if there's a pun off happening, I will just be in the audience just groaning, and there will be different levels of groan depending on different levels of pun.
What pun were you referring to? Did I make a pun and I didn't even realize it?
No. Surprise is on our side.
Surprise and on. Yeah, we're going back to that. Yeah.
When John mentioned like we're gonna like I don't know make a splash or something, and I was just like,
oh yeah. I was like, yeah.
So like, no offense to Assis, like as far as History of Westeros, but I will like very vocally every pun. I want to chime in when we get to Blakeney taking the quarterdeck after they board and aiming the guns down and then boarding into the gun deck through the hole that they blasted into the Acheron. I want to chime in.
Go ahead. Okay. Go for it.
Do it.
Higgins slamming his hand down in front of the cock. That's the lock mechanism for the flintlock, by the way.
Good to know.
So we can talk about like cocking a pistol or a flintlock. You have like half cocked and then full cock. So full cock, before they're able to shoot, like they jump down there. One of the lanyards for the trigger mechanism is cut with a sword. And another is stopped by Higgins slamming his hand down in front. And the flint, by the way, this should have been way more graphic. This is one of the few complaints I have about the scene. The flint would have stabbed right through his hand. Because as they were getting ready as they were luring the Acheron in, they were loading up cartridges. They were knocking all the imperfections off of the round shot. So... And one of the things they were saying was sharpen all your flint. Like make sure you have fresh flints and make sure they're sharp. If the flint is dull, it's less likely to make a spark to actually set off the gun. So him slamming his hand down in front. And of course, the look on his face is, I just want to kiss him. He's so cute. Like, he's just so like, he looks like he's about, he was like 1 second from soiling himself. And I don't
love that
like
soiling
because he's just like, because he slams his hand down and it was just that close. Like someone had pulled the lanyard trigger goes off and the flint hits his hand. So he had stopped it from striking the strike plate for the spark. And realistically, we probably should have seen some blood spurt out, but I don't know if he was making that face because he was a half second from having the gun, shoot and sink the surprise, or the fact that a flint just went through his hand. And then another second later, it shows someone dousing the powder on one of the guns as well. So the gun is set off. You have the ignition on top with a vent hole that is behind or amongst the lock mechanism. So you have the cock, pretty much cocked back, that holds the flint, and then you have the strike plate. So you have a spring that is let go with a lanyard. It's pretty much, the lanyard is tied around the trigger. So you just jerk the lanyard, it pulls the trigger, and then that releases the spring. So when the flint strikes the plate, a piece of spark falls into a priming pan, which pulls the charge inside, and then you have the explosion. So someone threw a bucket of water onto this gun, which pretty much made the powder, the primer and the powder in the gun obsolete or useless at that point. And I'm just like, man, I am loving this scene. Like, it is just
wow, there's so much going on that I didn't even know was going on there. I'm gonna have to.
And it was just so many little things that I could really appreciate, and I was like, holy crap, the moment with Higgins, and I'm just like, oh my god, and of course I'm a big Team Blakeney all the way, and he's like, guys, we got a board, and they go into the hull through the hole that they blasted. It was so magnificent. And Jack's there fighting, and then Steven's there, and they're just like, okay, just they just carry on fighting.
And I love how Jack finds the piece of music on the floor. He's turning it around with his sword to see what it is, and if it, if he can play it.
Okay, can I read this in French? Let me see. Yeah.
Oh, and then the twist at the end. Gotta talk about
but the thing with Blakeney, I love that moment where both sides are aiming their cannons, and it's just about who's gonna get it off first. It's
yeah.
Oh. It's nope, you were a second too late. You're a goner. Bye.
Ooh, Tony, no. Higgins isn't a sailor. He was the surgeon's mate. So his hands are not going to be not like a sailor's.
I need some pictures, sir.
Yeah, I just need to read up on it while he's steady drinking away.
Yeah.
I feel for him so bad. That would be me. I have to what?
But that whole surgery scene, and Steven says, I do this by my own hand. And, and then you got Bettany, holding the mirror, and he starts to look away, and he pulls
he's
the mirror Bettany, please.
You have one job, just one.
I was like, I would just stare at the back of the mirror, just stare fixedly at the back of the mirror. That way you don't have to see what's happening.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah,
I would have done it by my own hand too, especially after you hear Higgins make that comment. I need to look at some pictures. I'll be fine. I got this, you guys. If I'm
maybe smell his breath too. Yeah,
you're not doing a thing here. And then even Jack Aubrey is just looking away, like he wants to vomit.
And he's seen so much blood and guts.
My
dear doctor, I've been
for this.
I've been around and amongst wounds all my life, but then he's still not looking super comfortable while it's going on. And it's he's telling Higgins you're gonna have to lift up a rib, and I'm like, oh
yeah, I was like, I have a moment every time during that scene, but it's I don't like crazy stuff.
It's so funny how relieved Higgins is when it's all done, and he takes that deep sigh of breath, and he's like, that's gonna patch up so nicely, you guys.
I mean, what if there was still like a bit of cloth in there? I mean, you just couldn't have found it. Nobody else could have. But thank goodness Maturin is alive and well, and we have our happy ending as long as we have an alive Maturin, an alive Aubrey.
It's like I want to see
and a Blakely.
I want to see the alternate version of that scene where it wasn't all the cloth and he's just like, guys, got some bad news. But yeah, it's great, and then you just go into that whole sequence on the Galapagos, and it's really Stephen in his element, and it's wonderful to see. And again, I know Kelly already mentioned it, but I do love that moment between Jack and Stephen where Stephen's like, Jack, I feel you have put a burden on me that I can never fully repay.
That I can never fully repay.
Posh, name a shrub after me, something prickly and hard to eradicate. He says, good. A shrub, I'll name a great tortoise after you. Aubrey.
Yeah. So good.
So in the first book, Master and Commander, they're going to the ship is called the Sophie, and he as they are going to take a prize, they're pretty much like the ship gives up pretty quickly, and it's a French boat. It's almost like a yacht. And they're like, they can't, they gave up really easily, and they go aboard, and pretty much like the captain is on board with some passengers and cargo, and he also has his wife who is going into labor. And so Maturin has to go over to the other boat to deliver the baby, and the lieutenant, who is James Dillon, is convinced that she is dying. Like, it's so funny, like these guys who are like, so used to like battling wounds, and they're hearing this woman screaming in labor, and they're just like, she has to be dying. Like, there's how is she not dead? Like, how is she not dying? But it's just, these guys that are like so used to like, pain and blood and everything. And then they're just like James Dillon. I think there was another crew member that was just like, oh my gosh. Things I see. I loved that scene in the book. It's so great. Sorry, spoilers.
And it's funny that like our two softer, I don't know, like more introspective characters, Maturin and Blakeney, are the ones to suffer these horrible injuries and to deal with them really, really well.
Yeah.
Like, they're not the super masculine ones, but they're the ones who can suffer that kind of pain better than others can, even stand to look at it.
Well, it's like,
oh my God, Clay.
If I didn't love the character of Blakeney, like right off the get-go, it would definitely be that moment, midway through the film when they first get to the Galapagos, but then Jack decides they can't wait around, they have to leave, and and obviously Stephen is very upset about that, but Blakeney, having found this beetle on the deck of the ship, it comes over to him and says, I think it's a Galapagos beetle, were you to walk the island all day, you might never have come across it. And it's just
little drawings, they're so precious.
Yeah, it's just so great. But yeah, so we have the big battle at the end where we lose a number of people. This film, doesn't shy away from, actually, killing people. It's kind of a bit ruthless in that way, and we find out a lot of. If we've forgotten in the chaos of battle exactly who died, there's that moment towards the end where the camera just pans across the bodies of of each of the characters that were lost, and it sucks that oh god, what's his name?
Alan?
Mr. Allen.
Mr. Allen. It's like he goes in the first second after they board the ship, and they think, they've taken care of everything, and he says, "Looks like the job's done, sir." And then all of the people stand up, and he gets a shot right in the head and falls back. Which, by the way, and that is, does anybody recognize that particular actor?
Oh yes, was he Craster?
Yep.
Oh my god, that's something that I forget and then remember and then forget and remember, but sure, I almost fell back. Almost fell off my chair there.
Craster will do that. Yeah, Craster will do that. Yeah,
had a moment.
Yeah, darn it, Shades. This would have been like appointment viewing for everybody if I could have captured you falling back.
Well, this is a chair that leans back really far. I would not have fallen back. I just had a moment where I felt like I was going to capsize, but I didn't. Sailing lasers, there's a certain angle at which you're like, ah.
He plays a really good guy in this, and it's so weird because, I mean, it would have been, I think, weirder for me if I had seen Game of Thrones first, because you can't really picture him as a decent guy once you've seen him as Craster, as the worst person imaginable. But this has a lot of actors who I feel like have gone on to be really rather recognizable. Since James Darcy plays Mr. Pullings.
Oh yeah, James Darcy.
Man, that guy is good looking.
Oh yes,
oh yeah,
he is so good looking. There are a lot of good looking guys in this, to be honest. I mean, yeah.
But
we didn't really need Keira Knightley, John. I mean, there were enough good looking men. And we were like, we've got it. We've got it without her.
So anyway.
Oh dear. Okay, lesson learned there. All right.
Sorry.
Oh my gosh.
I accidentally hit a button. That's what that was.
Flipped.
Well
played, sir.
Anyway, but no, I do really like his arc, though. And it's sort of, in a sad way, it's kind of a counterpoint to Hollam, who isn't able to advance, and then we see Pullings, who ascends to to captain his own ship at the end, and it's really rewarding in that moment when he says, you'll take command of the Acheron, and here's your orders. And there's just that, the way James Darcy plays that moment of the weight of it, and it's really nice to watch. As a matter of fact, I feel kind of I always feel really bad for Hollam when I go back and I watch the original trailer for this film, because they intercut the two moments with Jack saying, find courage within yourself and you will earn their respect, and it cuts it against Pulling's reaction shot from the scene, and it's like, no, those two moments don't go together.
They have absolutely nothing to do with each other.
That's not fair. That is not dialogue that inspires someone. Okay.
In the first book, Pullings was expected to advance to lieutenant, and doesn't. Again, like Lucky Jack, going on shore and getting lucky with the wrong wife, probably contributed to that.
I'm sure he learns. I'm sure he becomes a better man in the rest of the books. It was kind of something that stopped me from reading more of them, but I probably should.
I think Maturin's arc is actually more powerful than Aubrey's.
Now, isn't Maturin a spy? in the books as well? What?
Although,
I haven't read the books. If I know this, okay, then it should be
like
fair game.
in Post Captain, which is the second book, it's obvious that he's a spy, and Jack is so oblivious.
Oh wow!
Like this, so it's just like, so
wow.
They're gosh, I think they're in Spain. They're either in Spain or France, and there was a captain saying, "Yeah, my some of my men have spotted someone dressed like in black, and they were up on the hill, and they had a spyglass, and they were taking notes. So like they want to catch him and like interview him." And Jack is like, "That sounds like Steven. He's probably out there looking at birds. He loves birds. He's always out there looking at birds. Like he loves, he's just like he loves animals. It's like." Poor fellow, you're taking him for a spy. Are you kidding me? And then Steven gets back, and Steven's like, putting some notes away into his journal, and Jack's like, "Can you believe such and such took you for a spy? They saw you up there on the hill." And Steven's like, "Anyway," and it's just like such a great moment. It's like, oh, poor Jack.
Well, it's
sweet
really,
summer child, Jack.
Well, it's actually really funny because a lot of that was made in like interviews about the film and sort of character profiles, taking information from the books. And so I assumed and I didn't know what spy meant, whether he was a spy for the other side, like spying on the British, or if he was spying for the British, or what the whole thing was. So I spent my entire first viewing of this movie waiting for like a big bad guy reveal. Like he's actually up to nefarious things, which is such a shame because he's just such an honest, good man. So I was being suspicious of him on my first viewing, and that was really rather unfounded, for the purposes of the film itself. But yeah, it's nice to know that there's going to be a lot of different facets to characters that I'll get to enjoy when I actually read the books. But let's go ahead and talk what happens after the battle, because it's it seems that the captain, the French captain, was killed, and he gave the surgeon his sword to present to Captain Aubrey. So everything's perfectly fine and resolved, right, guys?
Yay! We win!
And if it hadn't been for Maturin saying, "Yeah, that shit replacement of a doctor they have now for Bettany," and Aubrey was like, "Well, I met Bettany," and
he said it was Higgins. Like,
yeah.
You have to go back and watch that moment too, because there's this, and it's fantastic acting on Russell Crowe's part. But when they're having that interaction, and he says, "Oh no, their doctor died weeks ago," and he gets this little like eye twitch that's so it's subtle, but it's present. And if like I figure like if you read his mind at that moment, he's just spewing like curse words, but that eye twitch is like him being like, "I'm not gonna say it. I'm just gonna."
There's a whole monologue going on in there, a whole montage of things.
But that was every time I see that eye twitch, I die. It's such a great moment of acting. And then he calls Moe it down, and he's like, "Just change our direction. Just we need to just like let's go."
What I love is that, and
and by the way,
there's nothing spoken. It's just, as you say, Laura, that eye twitch, and then that furious like slamming down, and then Steven's like, "Ah." So
yeah,
he knows exactly what that means. And then he's like, "Doctor gave me this sword."
Yeah.
And then Steven doesn't put up such a big stink about not getting to go to the Galapagos. He's like, "Subject to the requirements of the service." And it's like, well, the bird's flightless, right?
Yes.
He's not going anywhere.
Like Jack is like, by the way, Moet, we're gonna be to quarters.
I say.
And then you get that beautiful performance of Luigi Boccherini's music, and it plays over this whole final sequence.
It's so happy. It's
yeah.
Here we go again, guys.
Yeah.
And again, just the joy you get then from, it's showing everybody getting ready, and the beats of quarters, but then it cuts back to the two of them playing their instruments, and they start playing them as if it always looks like it's as if they were playing a guitar, basically.
Yeah, and you do that too with pieces like that. You can do that. It's neat. Okay, so yes, weevils. I want to make sure that we talk about the lovely officers' dinner, because some of my favorite moments were at the officers' table, where they're enjoying each other's company and having puns and jokes, and oh goodness, is there anything more iconic than the lesser of two evils?
When he calls for Killick.
I love how drunk they all are in these scenes. But Jack is the drunkest in the moment when they are headed towards the Galapagos Islands, and and he's carving up like pieces to serving. He's like, and the Acheron for me.
And I love how he's telling, he's doing the joke when he gets to the punchline of the weevil joke. He's like, there, I have you, don't you know that in the service one must always choose a lesser of two weevils? And he just totally loses it by the last word. He's so trying to keep it together and keep a straight face, but then he just busts out laughing at his own joke because I just can't take it anymore. It's so natural looking. Again, such great acting, and you can tell that these actors had so much fun together offset and making this movie together. Yeah, and it, I think it's that scene where it's one of those scenes where it leads into them all singing the song "Don't Forget Your Old Shipmates." Yeah, right.
Yeah, and it's a great moment as they all start singing together, and you feel this camaraderie amongst them, and then that in turn leads into one of the classical pieces that leads out of the scene. It's just some beautiful use of music and editing, and
I also love Jack's story of his two moments with Lord Nelson. This is so something that officers do. It's like, oh my God, did you ever get to meet him? What did he say? And well, it spoke to me on 2 occasions. And there's always it's usually like some bullshit stories. Like, he asked me to pass him, or, I drove his truck for him and I got the gas or something. Or he asked me to pass the salt. But then he tells this one very lovely, heartwarming story about how, Nelson was talking about himself not having his coat on a cold night on deck, and telling somebody that his zeal for king and country kept him warm. And Jack Aubrey said, you'd think it was pitiful stuff from anybody else and say, what nonsense. But with Nelson, you felt your heart glow. And the way that he told that too, you could just tell he has that really, that kind of charisma as a captain to tell a good story and captivate your attention and make you feel like you're there. And we see that shot of Calamy just kind of smiling and being like, that's what I wanted to hear.
Yeah. And I do love both of those moments, because the first one, he's playing for the whole table just to get a laugh, where he says, he leaned across the table, looked me straight in the eye, and said, Aubrey, can I trouble you for the salt?
That was great, by the way.
And it makes the whole table just crack up. But then he also knows that Calamy really needs to hear the second story, and he needs to really make sure he's selling it, and to give Calamy, that that moment for the story itself to make his heart glow. So I really like that Jack is trying to fulfill both.
He's a
purposes.
jokester, and he's also like the solemn, inspiring captain. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. But yeah, those are some really good scenes, and yeah, again, it's really fun watching Russell Crowe play drunk Jack Aubrey because he's a captain who commands respect and all this stuff. So it's really fun to just, there's the one scene where I think one of you guys mentioned it, where he's, he says something, kill it, is next to me. He's like, kill it, and he's standing next to him.
Kill it, and he's just like, he's holding the dessert, and he's just like right there, like.
I want to know what that dessert was. It looked like some kind of a pudding, but oh man, I'd love to have be able to recreate that.
It's like, I just want to know what the scenario would be if some kind of emergency happened like right then, and Jack is just totally incapacitated. Hopefully they wouldn't have to worry about that scenario.
Yeah. Well, they have an officer of the watch, and I guess like there's nothing like an emergency at sea to sober you up real quick.
Yeah.
Lauren, what you said before, like as far as like 95% like waiting for to happen, and then like 5% of we're gonna die. I've had that moment.
Yeah.
Like, a couple of times. And and
I sail too, like smaller boats, and that's how it is. That's how it is.
I did have one instance, and it was my first one. Anchor watch. We slipped, and we were dragging another ship with us into the shallows.
No.
And it was. I hear one mate is off to the watch. He's to be woken if something goes wrong. He's in the chat as well, and then I hear the second mate whose berth is underneath mine start to get up, and I'm just like, oh shit, something's happening. So I pull the curtain back. I'm like, what's going on? And he's in the midst of like putting on his like foul weather gear, and he looks at me and he's like, all hands. And I was just like, sweet, we're gonna die. Like I just like throw everything like open, and I jump out of my berth and I start putting everything on. It was literally like
this is what you're waiting for.
It was just like so dumb. It was such a stupid moment. But I like run up on deck, and I've got like the spotlight, and I shine it over, and there's the channel marker like right there, and I was like, ah! It was a moment of, all right, shit's happening, let's go. It was I think it was just before 4 a.m.
I love that you're getting dragged into the shallows. It wasn't even like a stormy open ocean type of thing where
we were anchored in Breton Bay. We were anchored in Breton Bay, Maryland, we were rafted up to another tall ship, and thanks, Todd. He's in the chat. So he was the officer on watch. And it was a cold front had come in at night. The wind freshened. Our anchor slipped, and we were kind of being dragged, and we had to cast off from the other ship, start up the engines, get turn back around, and rehook. Drop the anchor again.
Mm-hmm. Wow,
but
nice.
It's one of the few scenarios I've been in. But it was fun. I was literally like, we're gonna die. Like I literally thought that. I was excited. It's one of those things
you have to
where
get your
like,
adrenaline going for a good. It's either going to be used for bad or for good, and you might as well try to convert that into some positive energy.
The difference between a sea story and a fairy tale is a fairy tale starts off with once upon a time, and a good sea story starts off with this is no shit. There I was. So that's when it comes to like a good sea story. That's when it comes to like all sailors, officers, that's how you got to start it off. This is no shit. There I was.
Yeah.
20-foot seas.
Oh yeah, we do that too. There I was.
Yeah.
So there I was.
It's
Yeah.
It's like the fisherman. The fish starts off this big, and then the more the story goes on, the bigger the fish gets.
Yeah.
So anyway, I did want to go into just briefly is a couple behind the scenes stuff for the film, because I got the chance to watch a little bit this morning with the documentary, and one thing that I really liked was when Peter Weir was having a conversation. I'm not sure if it was the producer or a studio executive, but he said apparently the conversation went, I'm not going to pitch something to you. I'm going to present you with a gift. And he brought out this sword. And Peter Weir says he looked at him and he said, O'Brien. And that was how it basically went. Like, he knew exactly what was being offered to him, and apparently he wanted to do, but he didn't think that he could, because at first he was thinking of just, if it was a straight adaptation of the books, basically starting at the beginning. He says, I'd actually do, more towards the middle of the books and have them, already, on a journey basically, and get to know the characters during conflict. And that's essentially what he did. But I do really, I love the idea of a pitch for a movie, basically being presenting someone with a sword, and the fact that then that person knows exactly what it is they're being offered. It's great. I
didn't really get it. I still don't really get it, but maybe I don't know.
Oh,
like the sword and the O'Brien, like how does that? Am I slow? I'm not sure.
Well, I guess just by the type of sword it was that Peter Weir knew that he was being offered Patrick O'Brien's books.
Oh. How can you know that you're being offered books by a sword? By being given a sword. Okay, that was like the part that I was like, huh? But all right. Sometimes you just have to shrug and accept it.
And another thing was what they did production-wise for this film. Apparently for the sequences out at sea, they found a ship which they could turn into the Surprise. But then they also built a ship to use in a controlled location. Basically, because you can't go out and shoot at sea all the time.
Yeah, it was like a miniature, but a very big miniature, like a 36-foot miniature. It still looked like a miniature tall ship, but like that's the size of a pretty decent like sailboat to take on a booze cruise with your friends, honestly. But for a tall ship, it still looks small.
Yeah. So yeah, it just it goes to show that once again, if Return of the King had not been the Oscar juggernaut that year, I have to think that this film would have won for production design, just for the sheer amount of work that they put into it.
Before we go there, give a shout out to the ship. It's H.M.S. Rose.
The Rose.
She was repainted and renamed, like officially, the H.M.S. Surprise. So she is, I think she's still part of San Diego Maritime Museums. If you go through I think it's Poseidon's like ledger, I think it's called, or Neptune's ledger. The French have like way more strict rules as far as renaming ships. I think the French, you have to do it like on like the last Sunday of the month or something. It's something ridiculous. But yeah, Neptune's ledger. So or the ledger of the deep you have to go through like certain ceremonies. And I do believe that the HMS Rose, now the HMS Surprise, went through the proper ceremonies. Again, we are very superstitious.
No, never. But yeah, so I don't know. Are there any parts of the movies that we didn't cover that you guys want to touch on? Kelly, I have to be honest that I'm shocked, though pleasantly surprised, I guess, that there was not more to inspire your, shall we say, rage about things gotten wrong. I guess they did a pretty good job.
I mean, I could. Do you want me to? There's one scene where Jack is standing at the bow, and it is just before they reach the doldrums. It's just before that scene where they show the ship becalmed. It's a wide shot of the whole ship, and it is obvious that it is motoring.
Oh,
the sails are, the sails are braced up really sharp on a starboard tack, like as sharp as they can get them, and the port sheets are hauled really, really tight, and the tacks, the starboard tacks are forward, and it's like making it look like, the ship should be drawing, or at least if they are motoring off what little wind, the sails would draw a little bit, but you can tell, like, look, as the camera goes down the port side of the ship, you can just see like those sails aren't drawing shit. And this, like, if you're on a starboard tack, she should be listing a little bit at least.
Yeah.
Nope, straight up, she is motoring. It's like that, it's like, oh my gosh, that hurts. And then there's one scene where they are, it's later on in the movie, they are laying on the capstan bars incorrectly. As a safety officer, I cannot abide by that. So when it comes to laying on the capstan bars, the capstan is it's what you summon the Kraken with. You guys know what I'm talking about. When you walk around the capstan, you're not supposed to like put your arms down on it like this, and you're not supposed to push like this. You're supposed to wrap your arms underneath it and lean your chest against it, and then walk against it. You're less likely to tire out your arms that way. Finn. Done.
Cool. So that's all that was wrong with it. I think that's pretty good.
Oh, yeah.
Peter Weir was pretty meticulous about authenticity. Like, I don't know. I heard that he was even trying to cast actors who had bad teeth just so that they could look like Unfortunately, you can't see anybody's teeth right here, but but he wanted to cast people who actually looked like they could be of the era. So
yeah, and I know that he even said, because he brought on a lot of talented actors for even some of the smaller roles, and I know one of the things he said, like, if you turn this down, it'll be okay with me, because it would be actors who maybe would not be at the forefront of a large number of scenes, but would always be in the background, and you really had to sell those performances.
Yeah.
But yeah, hats off to Peter Weir for crafting an absolutely magnificent film. I am actually really happy that he did win the BAFTA for Best Director that year, which, in full disclosure, I think probably was able to happen because Peter Jackson had actually won Best Director for Fellowship of the Ring from the BAFTAs. So it's not like with the Oscars where they were like, let's just give everything to Lord of the Rings. So I was happy that somebody gave him Best Director, because it's an impeccably crafted film, and it's still one of my favorites. Like I said, I always feel like I'm discovering more and more with this movie each time I watch it.
You're here.
So one of the guys that we sail with, he's actually one of the mates. He was one of the riggers for the movie because he worked on Rose when I think Rose was in Connecticut, operating out of Connecticut. When and her captain was Richard Bailey, and Bailey is a oh my God, he's not captain of the Morgan, or he might be crap. Todd, what's Captain Bailey? What's he's a really well-known captain here on the East Coast. But he pretty much told or Patrick O'Brien was like, you take this ship and paint it in like 18th century colors, it could be the H.M.S. Surprise. And Bailey goes and grabs the thanks Tony. I could talk about riggings for weeks. But he goes and gets like historical 18th century paint colors and was like, pick it out. What's correct?
Yeah.
Todd. Anyway, Captain Bailey, legend.
So, Laura, as we're winding down, is there anything we didn't talk about that you'd like to, mention or have any more thoughts?
One thing that I guess I would have to divert to Kelly on this, that was always confusing to me, is a scene early in the movie when they're refitting in the shoals off the coast of Brazil. Mm-hmm. And you have that moment where, first off, you're going beyond what Aubrey's orders were, because he has that comment, oh, I was supposed to just follow them as far as here, but we're going to keep going. Is something like that realistic and feasible, that you can do that much repair on a ship without being at a dock or at a port?
I was going to ask that too.
Yes. Yes. Sailors can get very creative. And of course, you've got a team of carpenters aboard the ship as well. Sailors are what they referred to as jack of all trades, master of none. Sailors are well educated in carpentry, blacksmithing, rope work, canvas work, but they're not considered masters in any of those tasks. They're not master shipbuilders, but they're expected to repair or replace anything that breaks on the ship, other than if you have a mast part, and I'm talking about like an upper mast, you usually have spare parts on the ship. You can stop and get a mast at an island. And that's something that Jack had mentioned in the movie. Like, I'm not gonna, trounce around an island, shopping for a mast. You're pretty much, looking for a really tall straight tree to chop down and use as a mast. But the repair sequence in the movie was really great. It showed them working with adze. They have all of these spare pieces of wood that they can shape into various replacement parts for the ship, the things that get broken and blasted away. And all of this talent you will find on a warship, more or less, because so many things are being damaged by engagements. You can do just about anything except replace a lower mast, which technically you could beach a ship or careen a ship and do that. It would be very, very difficult, because you have these large pieces of wood that you carry with you and you use as shear poles. You can set these up so you can turn them basically into construction cranes for the ship. And I could go into a lot of detail on how exactly these are all set up, but I'm not going to do that to you all. You can do a fishing batten, and you can actually see something like this done in the background in the movie. I can't remember if it's the beginning or towards the end, but you have essentially what are like kind of splints. Like if you break a leg and you have a splint, these long, very rigid battens where a mast could be weakened or cracked. you can put battens on them, and you're pretty much putting wolding. So it's like very tight rope wrapped around it, and it's pretty much like a splint on a broken bone. These are going to be things that you can make do with until you can get into like a proper port or a proper shipyard to have repairs done. One of the great things about the book series is it gets into like the finance of running a ship like that, and how like all of the expenses, like you get judged on everything you break or gets broken on the ship. Like the guys that run the shipyards are tight asses, and you got to deal with their drama and their attitudes. What actually, I think this is in Master and Commander, the first book, because one of the guys that runs one of the royal shipyards is like, you get advancement by saving money. Like if you go out there and get all your pieces and parts of your ship broken in a big grand battle, you're less likely to be promoted. No, you save the crown money, they really, really like you, so they advance you. Which is really messed up.
That sounds about right. I mean, when we write our officer reports, one of the things that we have to include is resource management. What did you do to save the Air Force money? So it makes sense.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Lowest bidder. So it's a sad state now, but what's strange is back then a lot of royal ships were almost like catering to an ego. There was almost no expense spared when it came to building a royal ship, because it was like a floating palace / floating fortress. And then that kind of transitions when you're more likely to sink a ship than take it as a prize. There you go, Tony. Yeah, MacGyver. Everything is MacGyvered. So, Shakes, I know you're familiar with The Tempest.
Yes.
So, the story that it's supposedly based on, the Sea Venture, shipwrecking on Bermuda in the fall of 1609, the castaways or survivors, they build 2 small ships while they're on Bermuda, called the Patience and the Deliverance, and they sail them to Virginia the following spring. So that should give you an idea of how talented the colonists and the people that are coming over are, but also the sailors and the riggers. They can pretty much they build 2 small ships and sail them from Bermuda to Jamestown in a matter of 5 or 6 months.
Wow. That's impressive.
But yeah, repairing at sea, Laura, what you're asking, when they get on a reef, you pretty much drop your anchors over one side and you haul the ship over so she lists over, and you can pay the bottom a little bit more. Yeah. So you can you can caulk below the water line, then you can switch it over. You can, raise the anchors, drop them on over the other side, roll the ship over a little bit, and that will... you can do a lot of caulking and paying. The expression devil to pay, pretty much, or between the devil and the deep blue sea, you've got the water line, and then below that. So if you have to pay the devil, you're pretty much paying below the water line. Paying is another way of caulking a boat. So you caulk it, and then you pay it with pine pitch. So you seal it with pine pitch.
I love the history of those. It must be a book about phrases that we've borrowed from nautical history that can kind of illuminate that progression in our language.
Oh my gosh. Woo.
Yeah, so
Is it a full moon? Oh my gosh, this is crazy. Thanks, Amy.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're almost at 3 hours. I will have to. I did drink a lot of port,
Yeah.
so I can either take a break now to go to the bathroom, or we can like wrap up. So I don't know how much longer you guys want to continue this.
Yeah, even though I know Kelly wants to go all night, but I think we can probably wrap up soon. Just as one more thing that I do want to talk about, because I feel like I didn't mention it that much, is one of my favorite moments of this movie really is that conversation between Jack and Stephen about midway through the film when they're leaving the Galapagos Islands, because it's such a sort of strain on their friendship, and just from an acting standpoint, it's a fantastic scene. I just love, the way Paul Bettany, delivers those lines. Oh, I see. So after all this time in your service, I must confine myself to. I don't remember all the lines, but yeah, he talks about, for my part, I look upon a promise as binding, and it just leads Jack to say, "I commanded King's ship. We do not have time for your damn hobbies, sir."
And I wish you would not speak of the service in this way. It makes me so very low. I also really like their conversation that they have when Stephen is asking if it's just after Worley has died, and Jack is asking if Stephen's heard anything from the rest of the crew about how they're taking it, and Stephen is being kind of cagey about it. He's like, "Am I talking to my friend, or am I talking to the ship's captain?" And yeah, maybe we should have turned back a few weeks ago. This is beginning to smack of pride, and I love like their little scenes together. Their dialogue is always so good.
Well,
sorry, go ahead, Laura.
No, I think that's just another example of just Stephen trying to be a good friend. I mean, he was trying to warn his friend that, hey, as a captain, you're about to have some serious issues with some of your crew members, and things might get hostile and dramatic, because you still had Hollam in the picture and what was happening with him. So, I think that was just another example of him just trying to warn a friend, like, you've got some stuff that you need to address right now.
Yep.
Yeah, one part that I really do like about that scene after Worley dies and they're talking with each other, and I think you actually mentioned this bit of dialogue, Laura. It's after Stephen says, "Can you really say that there's nothing personal in this, course of duty," or something to that effect? And Jack says, "Orders are issued to the requirements of the service. My orders were to pursue them such and such far." And he says, and then he sort of mumbles to himself, "I ceded my orders a long time ago." It's like he's realizing it as he's talking. And so it's sort of an admission of
not accustomed to defeat, though.
Yeah, so I really do love that moment.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, he's just able to be open with Stephen in those scenes, and Stephen is the one person who's able to kind of call him out on some of his BS.
Mm-hmm.
And it just results in a lot of wonderful moments. Yeah, so question as we're closing out, how badly do we still want a sequel?
No.
I mean, I really do, but I would want a sequel with the same actors, and they're kind of getting old,
Well, I would say maybe instead of using the nomenclature of a sequel, spin-offs, And I didn't mean to cut you off, Shakes.
I'll take that.
I would totally be down for seeing, Blakeney as a captain now.
That would be so good.
And, how Pullings is doing. He might have retired.
James Darcy still looks good. He must still look good.
There's a lot that I think, you could do in that route, but you would have to have the same actors. I think if you cast, it would just be doing everyone a disservice.
I mean, I would be happy if they just started fresh and did a series of the books like they did of, like the Horatio Hornblower series way back when. But the thing is that with Master and Commander, it's such a beautiful movie. It feels like perfection. And I mean, I guess you can still redo it. You just need a lot of time. So I would be happy for a series in the next 10 years or something. I mean, they're doing a series for Lord of the Rings, and whoever thought that they were going to do that this soon after.
Yeah, why the hell would you do that?
Yeah, well,
I still don't know why the hell. I mean, I'm just kind of like eggshelly about it. I'm like, really?
Well, I will say, just for clarification, because I feel like there are people who still don't know this, is that series is actually a prequel series, and it's not going to be an adaptation of the books. But even so, from what I understand, I think that they're trying to move away from what the films were, and I'm just like, why? I feel like, and it's the same way with this film. It's like, for Lord of the Rings, Peter Jackson established such a beautiful foundation, especially with the 3 Lord of the Rings films. And to move away from that, just, it's not something I'm really game for. And I kind of would feel the same way about this. I know the actors are older, but, maybe Laura's idea is the way to go. Continuing it with, if you can't bring in Russell Crowe and Paul Bettany, then do it with some of the other characters like Blakeney, Pullins, and something that you could continue on the legacy of this film, without saying, no, we're just going to disregard it.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, it's.
I will say that I got to tell Billy Boyd to his face that Master and Commander is like bar none, like absolutely beyond the standard for historical movies. Like, ask any historian, they will tell you Master and Commander is the one to reach. It's the one to beat as far as historical accuracy and beauty and entertainment and everything. And he seemed to get a kick out of that.
He's like, thanks.
Yeah, he was like, all right, sweet.
Yeah, I will say
he was actually it was, of course he's answering a bunch of questions about, Lord of the Rings, but having Master Commander being brought up, he was like, oh, okay,
Somebody knows something else I'm in and likes that even more.
Yeah, I will say, I just put Amy's comment about Netflix. Yeah, Patrick O'Brien, if you're getting the feeling that you want to shop around your books for a television series, do not go to Netflix, because you won't get your whole story told.
Unfortunately, Patrick O'Brien passed away in 2000.
Oh, did he? Okay. I did not know that. I apologize for that. But
he had the last book wasn't completed. It was the 21st novel, and I think that was released. Oh my gosh, I don't know. I can't remember. But it was released after his death.
Oh, was it finished though, or?
I think it was maybe finished by the publisher. I can't remember. Someone wiki. It's been 17 years since the movie was hard to get off. Yes, that's true.
Do you know, was that meant to be the last book, or as a conclusion, or?
Well, the later you get into the books, the wonkier the timeline gets. It's really bizarre because when it goes through the different wars and different conflicts, there's going to be downtime that the captains and the crew go through, and honestly, like, it's so boring. It's so boring when they're on land. I hate all the romance in it. I'm just like, enough of the romance. This is terrible.
Okay, so
yeah,
it looks like it looks like it wasn't completed, just and they just put out what was finished. That's that's interesting because I had wondered whether they had somebody else finish the book or not, because I feel
not
like
all of us have a Christopher Tolkien.
Yeah, and I feel like that's also relevant to sort of discussions that we've all had within the Song of Ice and Fire community, which I don't want to go too far down that road.
I'm going to knock on wood.
Yeah, let's
out of respect. But there have been other authors who have their work's been unfinished, but then they've had somebody else finish it. The aforementioned, Christopher Tolkien, who edited and finished up, the Silmarillion, and also you have the Wheel of Time series, which was carried on by another author. So yeah, it'll be interesting seeing what situation we're in with the Song of Ice and Fire. Obviously, we all hope that we'll see the entire series written by George.
If he dies tomorrow, I'm coming for you so hard.
I'm knocking on wood over and over right now.
All right, we're at about 3 hours, you guys.
Yeah,
Damn.
and I've decided to close it out on
hit the head. Yeah.
on discussions.
Yeah, let's have that be our last thought. A thought of good luck for the Song of Ice and Fire.
But yeah, anyway, I want to thank you guys for coming on to talk about this. This has been a long time coming, and it's been great. And this is one of my favorite movies, so I'm glad that we had a very thorough discussion, even though I do apologize that it went on for 3 hours.
It was great.
Yeah, so if you guys just want to let people know where they can find you on, whether on social media or Shakes, you have a website, correct?
I do. I haven't posted anything in a while. I used to do some essays on Shakespeare and A Song of Ice and Fire, but that's at shakespeareofthrones.com. You can find me at Shakes of Thrones on YouTube for some audio recorded versions of those essays, and at Shakes of Thrones on Twitter.
And yeah, and Kelly, well, I mean, I've put everybody's Twitter in the description, so I know if you not everybody's Laura, because I don't even know if you are on Twitter.
Yeah, Laura, I never use it. The only social media platform that I really make consistent use of is Facebook at this point. But by all means, if you want to try and find me there, and I know you, go for it.
Yeah, I'm on Instagram as jdedredhed. If you guys want to follow me, I try to follow all y'all. Everyone in the chat, everyone here. Yeah, I think I'm following everyone, either on Twitter or on Instagram. And if you find me on Facebook, sure, add me. Whatevs.
So yeah, just closing out, I will say make sure you all tune in for Here Be Dragons tomorrow to watch as Stephen and guests talk about Dungeons and Dragons and Lord of the Rings. And then next week, we will all be doing our anniversary stream to talk about the phenomenal past year in all 3 of our channels. So it's going to be a lot of fun. And yeah, just thank you all for tuning in. Hope you enjoyed yourselves. And if I know there's a couple people in the chat who haven't seen the movie yet, go watch it. It's really, really good.
Wow.
Yes.
And then tell other people how much you liked it.
And then rewatch the stream and you'll know what we're talking about.
Exactly.
Yes. Thank you, John, for having me.
Yes, this was definitely very fun.
Yeah.
I enjoyed it.
Yeah. And like I said, I had a blast, guys. And Shakes, just your outfit, the ship, everything, it's just fantastic.
I had fun. Thanks for
it's funny because when you said there was going to be a surprise, I really didn't know what you meant. Part of me thought that you'd be, armed and ready to play some of the music from the film. And I had
that would have been a good one. Except that it might have been a little bit awkward. I'd be like, and here's the prelude. I don't know. Yeah. No, I just meant that surprise is on our side. That's all.
But I never expected this, and this was absolutely fantastic. So thank you guys. And and yeah, so I guess that'll wrap things up. I'm happy to see we maintained most of our viewers, so you guys didn't all fall asleep. So thank you. So just have a wonderful night, and I will see you next week on Here Be Dragons, and then just stay tuned to my Twitter account because I'll let you guys know what's coming up next on this channel. All right, have a good night.